Mic's off. That has a tendency to mess up the system, so to speak. So be sure and speak into your microphones. Also, I want to thank our citizens for being here. I appreciate y'all in the news media. Yesterday was my, and I'm going to tell them my age, yesterday was my 33rd budget retreat. And I have to say, Bo and Brian Steen, probably the easiest to understand and most informative. And I appreciate the amount of work that you put into this. So with no further ado, we'll call the meeting to order. And Mr. White, sir.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me. Could I have just a couple of comments recapping yesterday?
Have at it.
I agree that Mr. Weichel did a tremendous job yesterday, and I'm sure he's going to overwhelm us again today with exhibits. But taking a lesson from him, I have an exhibit I'd like to share with council members. Oh, let's see, one for Mr. Steen. Did I give you two? Yeah. Get your next one there. Let's see.
Two.
I'll take them down.
Okay.
I still have a little mobility left. Not a whole lot, but let's see. There's a couple for you. There's probably one for you and one for Jessica there. I would think.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you should have. All right. I thought, before we jump into another, this is 4.5 hours yesterday over that, and I thought before we jump into a new set of, I don't know how many exhibits today, so I labeled this Exhibit 0 so I won't get mixed up with Bo's, and I thought we ought to just take a few minutes to recap what we learned yesterday. Certainly we all agree Bo did a tremendous amount of work. The format was far superior to what we have seen in the past in the 2-day March workshops. But regrettably, I have to say I saw a little change to the department head's approach to budgeting. All the numbers I saw were just add-ons to last year's budget. And the big outcome was that the staff is recommending a deficit of $564,000. That's compared to last year's deficit, which they recommended and the council adopted without question, of $238,000. What we don't know, we did not hear one example of town operations that have been revised, changed, innovated, or one example of how we're going to do more for less in fiscal year 24-25. Or any new sources of revenue. The big thing we don't know is the year-to-date results. In month 9, which would have been through March of 2024, we have as council members, we have no idea where we stand with revenue, with expenses, or how much has been dipped into the reserves for capital purchases during the year. And my comment on that is in even more years than the mayor has sat through these budget presentations, about probably 50 years of being on all sides of the budget preparation, from a department head to a manager who was reporting to a board, to board members who were, a board member who was dealing with budgets presented to an international association. I've never been in a budget process that did not have a year-to-date column of numbers to bring everybody up to date on where things stand going into the budgeting process. What we know is what the 23-24 budget was and what the 23 audit was, which was the prior year. The other thing we don't know are personnel plans. We have heard nothing about any personnel planning. We saw one example yesterday of numbers put in the budget in case somebody retires. Well, what kind of planning is that? That's not planning. We don't know anything about a repaving plan. I got appointed to the paving committee. I've never heard a word about the paving plans for fiscal 24-25. I've asked some questions about it. disappointed. That was one of the highest ranking priorities of our citizens. We don't know specifically what's planned for paving, except that more money from Powell Bill will go into it in the coming year than in the past year. But what about the rest of it? Health insurance, we all agree. Our employees need the best possible health insurance plan we can provide them. What we don't know is when, where, and how the precedent started that council members also deserve the best health insurance coverage the town can provide them. 3/4 of us are retired. We came onto the council with some kind of a retirement plan from some kind of a health insurance plan, either from our retirement plan or from Medicare. But we are replacing it with one that costs $9,000 a year for each of us to go on the employee plan. And what impact does that have on the overall cost of the premium of the employee insurance plan? We don't know. We know that all volunteer service requires sacrifice. Whether it's a church committee, a community action committee, or whatever it is, it takes time. It takes your time away from your family, personal plans, work in a lot of cases. And I have to admit, serving on town council is the most time-consuming service I've ever engaged in. So somewhere in the past, maybe 100 years ago, the council decided that council members ought to receive an honorarium for that service. And I don't disagree with that at all. I think it's up to each council member to decide whether or not they want to take that honorarium. That's fine. What we don't know is what is a fair amount. Presently, it's $2,800 per council member, $4,300 for the mayor. Is that the right amount? I don't know. Should it be higher? Probably. I have no objection to that. But I don't think we ought to, instead of dealing with that question, tuck it into the employee health insurance plan and intermingle the decisions we make about what's best for our employees with what's best for council members. So that's a few. I had a few more questions, but I ran out of time this morning to get here before the meeting started. But I wanted to have an exhibit, put it in front of everybody, and that's my recap so far. I don't know if we're going to have any other recap of yesterday, but next Monday we have a presentation of the budget to a public presentation of it. So I don't know what's going to happen between now and next Monday. We haven't heard. Council, the staff has thrown out a bunch of options. They threw out a whole list of things that if you want to cut services, cut these out. Well, we've already decided that. We're not cutting services. So council's decided that. So I guess we'll wait to see. Is the staff going to come back next Monday night and present a budget that has a $564,000 deficit? And that's just the general fund. We haven't heard the utility fund yet, which we'll get into today. But that's my recap. Thank you for listening to it, and just wanted to get it out there so that we're following the full disclosure point of view that we had a great amount of effort demonstrated yesterday. I'm sure we'll have a great amount of effort demonstrated today. Thank you.
All right. So today we'll talk about the utility fund. So yesterday, remember, general fund is tax driven. So this is our water and sewer sales driven here, and we'll jump into that. So first, I'm gonna, just like yesterday, we're gonna hand out an exhibit list, and then we'll go through the various exhibits.
I knew you'd have one.
All right. So as you can probably tell right away, we don't have as many exhibits as we did for the general fund yesterday. And that's because we're gonna go through some of the similar format, but then at the end, in item C on the agenda, McGill will come up and do their capital improvement plan and water and sewer rate study and present that. So for this morning, or Exhibit A, we'll jump in the utility fund overview. And just like we did yesterday, we'll go over the fund balance and debt service. So for fund balance, where did we end on the June 30th audit last year? The unrestricted fund balance was $4.2 million, and that was 69% of expenditures. So if you remember yesterday, we had 105% in the general fund. So comparatively in the utility fund, we have a 69%. So if you do the 69% divided by 8, that'll give you how many months of operating money we have in our reserves. So what is going to impact fund balance so far this year? Well, we've only really had one thing, the Pine Burr Sewer Replacement Project. That was a budget amendment we did a couple months ago. We also have new tap and connection fees, that additional revenue that came in. So our system's expanding, which is a good sign. That has brought in $62,000, so that pretty much offsets that sewer line replacement. And because we're expanding the system, we do have a small trend in revenue increasing for our different customers. So for debt, this is a list of our debt that is in the budget for the utility fund. So as we went through yesterday, that first column, that is what the annual payment is in the budget, totaling $446,000, which is almost 8% of our operations expenses. You'll notice the one in the bottom there is red. So what that designates is a new debt item that's being proposed in the budget you'll see here shortly. And that is for a capital item that is in the water and sewer construction fund. So let me hand out the debt service schedule that shows all the amortization, and like I did yesterday for the general fund, this one will be for the utility fund.
Thank you.
All right, so you'll see, let me bring this up on the screen. So looking across that top row where it says FY25, so you're looking across, that is the total amount would be $358,000. What that doesn't include is that new proposed debt that we just saw on Exhibit A there on the PowerPoint screen. So this is all the current debt that we're under, and then if you add in that proposed new item, that's what would make the total amount that you saw on that other exhibit. But for the total debt and all the payments, you can see the longest one here is the water and sewer for the Settings subdivision. That will be paid off in fiscal year 48. So that's kind of how you read that going down the line. And then the total amount left on that loan. So just wanted everybody to have a copy of this for your records.
Could you elaborate a little bit on that Settings debt?
What would you like to know?
I'm sorry?
As far as what?
Well, it's a debt of $1.6 million, the biggest single debt item on the utility fund debt. We have 24 years remaining on it. What was the amount of the original debt, And what was the purpose of it, and what, you know, why did, is it generating revenue, or is it just debt? What's the story on that one?
So I believe that was a 40-year loan, so that was way before my time.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, so it was, I guess, to install the water and sewer in the Settings subdivision up near the lake. I don't know what the original debt amount was.
How many homes are built in the Settings now?
That, I don't know.
How many are paying taxes?
That I do not know.
Probably less than 5.
So.
Yeah, let's
Less
say
than 5.
Yeah,
5.
yeah.
How much water, what's their annual water bills? $60 a piece, $300 a year?
Yeah, something like that.
Not quite paying the debt service, is it?
I wouldn't say so.
You see, this is the kind of financial planning and thinking that drives citizens nuts if they're paying attention to it. I had discussions with Town Manager Morse back in 2010 about this very thing. And I pointed out to him that while the town was taking out a bond to put in a substation for a subdivision that wasn't even developed yet, I was dealing with a subdivision in Pender County where Surf City was asking me if I would make a lot available for a substation. But I would have happily done that, but they were not going to put a substation in unless a developer for larger parcels in the area paid for the substation. So while I'm hearing the little town of Surf City, it's bigger now, but the little town of Surf City wasn't going to spend $2 million to put in a substation for potential development, here we are, Valdese taxpayers get hit with, I don't know what it was at the time, but it was about $2 million bill, I think, to install a substation for a development that 14 years later still isn't being developed. You know, that's the kind of stuff we're getting into. How can we get rid of that debt? Can we transfer that debt somehow to the current owner of the Settings property, or the current Settings property owners? I know you don't have the answer, but it just points out that it's too easy sometimes to borrow money to do something that sounds good because somebody thinks it sounds good, and not because it comes from any kind of analysis. But here we are. We spent a couple $1 million putting a substation in. In fact, the original developer went belly up, and the other reason there's streets up there now is because there was a bond guarantee that paid to put streets in. But I mean, it was just a bad deal. But it's the biggest single debt item on our utility fund debt.
That happened too also about the time the bottom fell out of the housing market. So that had a real detrimental effect on that project also.
Bo, can I ask, the Valdese-Lenore Water Project, would this help any of this debt that we're gonna see in the coming years?
Yes. We don't have any data on that yet, but we need to enter an agreement with Lenore before we can make that determination.
Okay.
I just wanted to comment, regrettably, the town, I was around when that investment was made. There was great hopes that this would pan out for the town, that it would be a wise investment, but because of the severe economic downturn, it turned out otherwise. But I think we've been through this many times before, and the town, again, regrettably made this investment, but it is what it is, and hopefully within time we'll have more development in the Settings. But that's one development that has not turned out very well that's one investment that certainly has not turned out well for the town.
I think we have, and don't hold me to this number, 5 or 6 different developments along the lake, and most of them are proceeding with homes.
Right.
The one lacking on that is the Settings. I know Waterside, the folks from Waterside really knew what they were doing when they put their project together, and it's really doing well. There's probably 15 homes in there.
Or more.
Or more, yeah.
The point is, though, let's not gamble on what might be good. just let the developers pay for developing their own projects.
I think the town has been much wiser with these recent developments because of the settings experience, but Councilman Harvey makes a good point. That was, you know, it turned out to be not a good financial move for the town, and the citizens are paying for that, but we're much wiser going forward.
All right. So we're going to go ahead into Exhibit C for revenues now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bo, are you wanting this on the split screen? I didn't know if you wanted it. I hadn't pushed it.
I thought you had pushed it.
I didn't know if you.
All right. So on the revenue side, you can see it's a much shorter list than the general fund revenues, because our main streams of revenue are just water and sewer sales mainly. So going down the list, you see a big number that jumps out, water charges. So we break it down between residential, commercial, and industrial. And those are rate-sensitive charges. So and you're gonna see the rate proposals with the McGill rate study. So I don't wanna get into what the rates are, but these revenues are based off of what they're gonna propose later on, so everybody's clear. So you can see we have a revenue increase in the residential line, small increase in commercial, and a small increase in industrial. So they'll get into those shortly. Also in the wastewater charges, we have a revenue increase in those. And we can get the data where we're at to this point for council. It's not shown on here, but we are on track with what we budgeted last year compared to where we're at so far in this point this year. Is there any questions like that you see that pop out that you want to cover, or I can just go down the list?
You say we're gonna get into the details on the rates, how about
Yeah.
the fees, reconnection fees, we're gonna get into that too, or can we ask questions about that now?
Reconnection fees, we can talk about that if you'd like.
Now,
Yeah.
okay. So the reconnection fees, connection fees and reconnection fees, that's what we charge somebody who's gonna build a new home to tap into it. That's a connection fee. What's a reconnection fee?
Reconnection fee is when they miss the due date, and then they also miss the last date that they can pay before their water gets turned off for non-payment. So there's a fee to get the water turned back on.
Okay,
So
so that's a
that's-
penalty,
Correct.
but a tap fee,
That's for new. Yeah.
that's for new things, all right.
Yeah.
You see, now that's an example where the tap fee is gonna result in new revenue, right? Somebody's gonna pay a tap fee, and then they're gonna pay water, they're gonna buy water then, from then on, as long as they pay their bill every month. And that's where, I don't know what the answer is, I'm not quite sure what the question is, but the thing is, here we put $2 million, and we know the settings was a bad deal, and that was 14 years ago, we're not gonna do that again. But There we threw $2 million out there hoping that we'd get new revenue. Now somebody wants to build a new house. We charge them more for a tap fee, but we know they're gonna be buying water from us. So that's just a point. That's all. That's all. Yeah, the rest of my questions have to do with fees.
And we don't make money on that, even though it shows revenue coming in on the expense side. We just pass along the cost of the parts.
I know.
So it's not a big revenue.
And when we
maker.
build a substation, we didn't make any profit on that either.
Mhm. Good question. Any other questions?
What's proceeds from financing?
Oh, good. I was hoping somebody would ask. So that, we go back to that debt schedule, that new item proposed in the capital that we saw. So that is partly we're going to pay with cash, and then the rest of it we're going to finance. So $356,000 we would finance, and that what that designates is money coming in from the bank. So I had to account for that coming in as revenue, but it's going to be going out on the back side of things. So that's just showing that proceeds from the financing of the item.
So that's money,
So that's not actual revenue, it's budgeted revenue because the bank would be giving that to us to pay off that part of the capital
so
item.
it's all new financing. None of it's coming out of the town reserves, out of the utility reserves?
Now, that's an option that we can do. Instead of financing it, we can put that in fund balance, take it out of reserves, and not have to finance it. And that was something I wanted to bring to council's attention. That's an option that we can do. Instead of putting that 356 under proceeds from financing, we can move it one line down and do fund balance appropriate, not have to borrow that money.
And when you say take it out of reserves, you're talking about out of the general fund reserves or out of the utility
With
reserves?
utility, we wouldn't take that general fund, yeah.
All
So-
right, so that's a new number that we didn't have the last 3 years.
Yeah, and now as you can see, the fund balance appropriated number is 0. So in this budget that's being presented, we're not proposing taking any money out of the fund balance. So it's gonna be a balanced budget, balanced with the expenditures. Now, if we move that 356, then we take 356 out of fund balance. So it just, however council would like to proceed. So, and we'll get into that a little more as we get into the capital items. But that's kind of the direction I would need from council, is whether they would like to finance, or, if we went with that capital item, do we finance it? Do we want to take it out of fund balance? So,
Bo, are we gonna get, into the actual rates, when we look at our CIP, we're gonna look at their
yeah, what we'll do with me up here,
water and sewer rates?
we'll go through all the capital items, the budget, the summary, and then
Got it.
McGill will present the 10-year CIP, so we'll have all the items we just went through, and then the rate study and what rates we're gonna be proposing. So, I know that's a fun one to get to, so
Yeah.
we'll get there as soon as we can. Any other thing on the revenues before we get into the expenditure side? All right, so I'm gonna do Exhibit D now. All right, so the utility fund has 3 departments in it. You got the water plant, wastewater plant, and what we call water sewer construction. So that's putting new lines in the ground, repairing leaks, things like that. So the first one here is the water plant. Let me hand out Exhibit E as well. That was going to go with it. Similar to what we did yesterday. So water plant is gonna be in the middle section of this, Exhibit E. One of the big changes here that stood out is line 130, which would be your electric Duke Energy. So remember, we have an energy rate from Duke Energy increase. Because the water plant uses so much electricity, that rate increase gets exemplified here. So we've got an extra $25,000 in the budget to account for that increase. The other big item are chemicals, and we know that's been talked about, last couple of years. There's only so many suppliers for chemicals that we can pull from. So that item, we got an increase in that line of $332 for chemicals of $37,000. So the cost of supplies goes up. And we got some laboratory equipment that we need to replace too, so that's in the operating budget there. The total overall budget for the water plant is $2.44 million. Is there anything that stands out to you guys that you have any questions on?
Could we talk about salaries and wages a little bit?
Okay.
How many, across the line there, it runs pretty consistently each year, looking at 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. How many employees are we allocating to the water plant?
I believe we got 9. Is that correct, Eric? We got 8. Oh, we got 9. I'm sorry. We do have 9. We have 9 employees.
9
Yeah.
employees. Does that include, that's a full 9 employees, right?
Full-time.
That's 9 employees. There's not any management time charged there?
No. What do you mean by management? Like
Well,
from town hall management?
Anybody above the plant manager, is any of the town manager, your time, or the water resources director
Gotcha.
time?
Water resources director is allocated in there.
Pardon?
The water resources director position is allocated in there.
Is that the position that's gonna retire at the end of May?
Yes,
And so we have that in the budget for next year?
correct.
Is there a replacement plan?
Yes,
There is a replacement plan.
yes.
Who's gonna fill that position?
We don't know that yet.
But somebody is?
Yes,
Who's gonna make that decision?
the manager. The manager?
Well, Mr. Steen, have you decided who's gonna fill that position?
We just advertised.
I'm sorry?
We're in the advertising process at this point, receiving applications.
Should the council consider whether that position needs to be filled? We have a manager of each plant.
I believe the manager is in charge of personnel issues.
Pardon?
I believe the manager is in charge of personnel decisions.
Part of the personnel decision, yes. But doesn't this council have some say over the personnel budget? Number of staff, positions, personnel planning? It seems to me that should be a council decision. I have to say, I asked the manager a week or so ago if there was a plan. He said he didn't have a plan. So I don't know why we're budgeting for something that we don't have a plan for. This is a position that's gonna open the end of May, right?
Right, we do have a plan.
6 weeks from now.
We've advertised for it, so we do have a plan.
We have advertised for it?
Yes,
Where's it been advertised?
that,
Is it announced on the town website? It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I've seen it on there.
All right. Then I would ask that we put that item on the May agenda. Let's review that item. That's, okay, go ahead.
okay.
Bo, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Can you just remind us again what the pro rata is under the water plant? 920.
Yeah, that is designed to reimburse the general fund for general fund expenses, such as HR's time, manager's time, utility billing software, things like that, that the general fund pays for.
Okay.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it looks like chemicals, like other municipalities, I was reading the paper, Morganton's dealing with the same issue. You know, they mentioned that their supply increase, some of those, increases went up 30% on chemicals and other supplies, and we've seen a similar increase,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
All right. Let's, if
The
everybody's.
capital outlay, we'll get into that more detail with, at a different
Yes,
exhibit?
Yeah.
Okay.
exactly. All right, we'll go on to the wastewater plant. And, pretty similar story with chemicals. Councilman Pierce was just talking about. Line 332, chemicals, that's your biggest increase in this budget. We also have a new, and I can't explain the technicalities of it, but it's called a PAA process that we're doing. So this is a way to disinfect versus the old chlorine style of disinfecting. So there's some new equipment in there for that process. The overall budget is 2.22 million. And a big part of that increase is capital outlay, which we'll get into in a little bit. Any questions or observations on this one? Okay. And just a reminder, the group insurance and retirement, those percentages that we talked about yesterday, they're the same percentages that apply to utility fund. All right, we'll move on to water and sewer construction, which is actually at the top of your Exhibit E. So this one, I'll draw your attention on the budget here at the bottom. So your capital outlay item, part of that amount is the cash for the capital item that we're going to be talking about in a second. The other half of that is underneath it, under debt service. So that the capital item we're purchasing, but then we also have to pay the debt on it, right? So that we got to figure in that debt. That's from that proceeds from financing that we discussed earlier. So we're going to get the money from the bank, but then we're going to have a debt payment. So that debt payment is built into the $374,000 number, and that debt was part of the debt schedule that we saw on that PowerPoint. So it's coming in from the bank, it's going out through capital outlay, and then the debt payment is below it, wrapped up under the debt service. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. Any questions on this one?
And we'll see an example or the details of that in the CIP, right?
Yes, yep, very soon.
I have a simple question.
All right.
Clearing right of ways.
Mhm.
Alan, your folks do that, water sewer?
Yes. That's why we got the different tractors.
The tractor.
Like that.
And the cost,
We have money in there for, some stuff that hasn't been touched and things
Right.
that we can't do or we don't
So we're gonna, at this point, those are the three departments, okay, and the utility fund. So we're gonna jump into the capital budget changes, just to review that real quick.
Sir.
And again, we're getting into more detail here, but this is just an overview, like we saw yesterday for the general fund side. Just compares the prior year, what it was, and the net change of this year's proposed. So, under water and sewer construction, again, that large number, that is partly being financed unless we decide to pay with fund balance. So, what I'm gonna do now is, we got this in hand, I'm gonna hand out the packet that shows all the pictures. That's on Exhibit G. So, Exhibit G, these items will be discussed on a 10-year CIP that McGill will show you shortly. But we wanted to cover those now before we get into their presentation. So this will be on their year one column once you get their sheet. But like we did yesterday, I'm going to have the department come up and talk about their item here. So, Eric.
How do I scroll up and down this touch screen? Oh, use your mouse, okay. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
So the first item we're looking at is valves and electric valve operators. Currently, we have 1950s air-actuated valve operators that are piston-driven, and they're driven based off air pressure. What we'd like to do is replace 8 of these each year over a 3-year period. And the reason for this upgrade is to upgrade outdated air-actuated valve operators dating back to the 1950s, which are no longer supported due to obsolete parts. These aging units frequently experience malfunctions, causing operational disruptions on a weekly basis. Additionally, the bearings in most of these valves are either deteriorating or have already failed, resulting in challenges when the valve needs to be fully closed. To address these issues and improve efficiency, we propose replacing these outdated units with modern electronic valve operators. The upgrade promises to significantly reduce downtime and eliminate the need for costly repairs. Our plan is to gradually replace 24 units over a 3-year period, starting with a replacement of 8 units outlined in the request. And those valve operators are currently, the quote I got was about $12,500 per operator.
And how many of those do you need now? You gonna replace?
It's a total of 24 over a 3-year period, so we would do 8.
8, 24, 25.
Or 8, and 8 to come out with a total of 24. Like I say, we're dealing with 1950s.
I toured the water plant when I was in 4th grade. I think I recognize that top picture.
Do you need to replace the valve or just the operator? like I say, some of the bearings have gone out of the valves themselves.
Yeah.
And they're 1950s as well.
So
I'm
if
afraid
you-
if we put a new valve operator on an old valve, it could burn out the new operator that we're spending money to install. So this, like, this picture we're looking at here has the whole, it has the, what we're looking at, we're seeing the operator, but the valve is actually inside that, yeah, it's just off to the side of that picture. Right, so. It's like a big butterfly valve. Okay. Yep. And that's what I was getting to, yeah, the prior patch I was in was the Instrument Society of America, so, you know, I know all about those valve companies. Right. And I know some of my wealthiest friends are salesmen for valve companies. Right. So, anyway, yeah, so I was trying to nail this down, I guess it's a little over $12,000 a piece for the operators, but does that replace the entire valve unit or just the? That will replace a valve and also the operator. Yeah, okay, both of them for that. Yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised they're that reasonable. So, and the new operator will also have a wheel on it where if we have a power failure or something like that, we can physically go and wind this valve down. Right. Otherwise, we'd have to bring in a portable air compressor or something and somehow get that piston to shut that valve. Yeah, that's good. Any questions on that?
Certainly looks old enough, it needs to be replaced.
It does. So we'll go to.
What are you saying, Paul?
No comment.
So the next item is on-site and remote tank inspection. In accordance with state regs, it's mandated that we conduct inspections on all tanks containing finished water once every 3 years. The water plant in the town of Valdese maintains 4 such tanks in addition to 4 others situated out in the system, which was part of Triple Community. Subsequent to the inspection, any necessary cleaning of the tanks will be scheduled based on the findings of that inspection. So whatever we find next year or next fiscal year, based on their recommendations, we would then move forward with a cleaning process.
Questions, council?
Nope.
Okay. Next item is upgrade booster station and storage tank telemetry. Costs $65,000. All these units have what's called PLCs or programmable logic controllers. Basically, they're compact computing devices capable of receiving input data, issuing operational commands through their outputs. However, these PLCs have become outdated with spare parts no longer available. Yet they play a crucial role in our infrastructure, governing the initiation, necessitation, and communication processes of our booster stations and storage tanks. The replacements of these obsolete units would significantly reduce potential downtime, ultimately saving the town of Valdese money in the long term and ensuring greater customer satisfaction. The upgrade initiative is relevant to 7 locations across the Valdese water system. And part of this was part of the triple community that Valdese acquired over the years.
What do you replace them with, new PLCs?
It's gonna be some new PLCs.
How old are these?
I'm not sure the age of those.
What brand are they?
I'm not really sure the brands, to be honest with you, but I can certainly get you that information.
Are these the original ones Triple put in? Okay.
They are.
And I don't know when Triple was
Yeah,
built or,
long time.
yeah. So,
The PLCs are great, I mean, they were doing computing before computers, and they're still do their little
Right.
computers, but they do get old.
and any parts we're needing now, we're buying used parts if we can source them. So,
Looks like this may be a Chinese brand here, which might be another problem.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Sounds good anyway to me.
any questions? All right, here. This is our SCADA software, which means supervisory control and data acquisition. This is the software that we use at the water plant to control the whole process, whether we're turning on and off pumps, setting specific limits to where, even say Triple Community, we set limits to where that pump will cut on and cut off based on pressure. So that software is probably, Greg, how old do you think that software is? Do you know when that was installed? 15 years ago?
It's considerably newer than that.
Is it? Yeah. The software empowers employees to initiate, halt, manage, and oversee diverse processes within the water plant. However, it's a crucial note that the software currently is significantly outdated. Transitioning to updated SCADA software offers a multitude of advantages, including enhanced security measures, which we'd like to have, streamlined compliance monitoring, seamless integration of cutting-edge technology, and simplified programming capabilities. And basically all water plants, probably all over the world are updating their SCADA software. It plays a vital role in water plant operation. And the water plant's a pretty good money generator, so we'd like to keep it rolling the most we can.
One of our most important services that we provide is clean water. I was always amazed when I was at the water plant and go out and look and watch the SCADA system work. It's a pretty amazing piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Any questions? Okay.
Good.
Go ahead, sir.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, so our next department is wastewater, and we'll have Lonnie come on up.
Morning, council. First, and I think this is relevant, I want to thank Alan for letting us use the dump truck. We produce compost and we take it to citizens, and we don't have a dump truck. So Alan lets us use a dump truck. I want to thank Eric for our distiller went down that we use to make laboratory grade water for testing. And he's been making water for us using a small unit that he has at his plant. So I appreciate that cooperation. So you're looking at a drain in our dewatering building, and these are not draining. And we estimated $25,000 to do some pretty severe repair, but we've had somebody look at it, and it may actually be a lot easier to fix than that. So we're probably looking at considerably less since we prepared this sheet. Any questions about getting the drains fixed? Okay, the next one is a secondary clarifier. This equipment has the input of the process is received in the middle of that ring that you see. And we have two of these clarifiers. And you can see there's rust holes around the perimeter of this inner ring. As processed water comes in, it's meant to be detained within the ring for a certain period of time because there's rust holes. It can bypass that. It's not operating as designed. The request is for $25,000. Since we've prepared this sheet, I've had a contractor come out and look at it, and he believes that all we need is to replace the surface level metal. That's where the corrosion is happening. And it'll probably be considerably less than this to do both of the clarifiers. We'll just be welding a new ring around the inside at the water level. We'll have to drain the clarifier for them to be able to get in there and work, but just take a little scheduling to do that. All right. Next, this is a aeration unit. In the process, the nature gives us microorganisms to do the wastewater treatment. In order to keep these bugs happy, we need to give them lots of air. And these aerators mechanically impart oxygen into the water. We've got 2 basins. Each basin has 3 aerators. One is in use, the other one's on standby. The units date from the 1980s when this facility was built. Parts are not available for them, so in looking forward, it's possible that we could have a failure. These run continuously. In the event of a failure, we would not be able to source replacement parts. We'd have to cannibalize, which we have done in the past few months, move from one side to the other to keep it working. The thought here is to replace the obsolete aerators with modern units. The cost is high. We got $300,000. We have a couple of estimates. And for one aerator, the cost was somewhere between $250,000 to $283,000. So our estimate on the cost was pretty close. But if we wanted to do this, this would be for one motor and aeration unit and the associated drive to run it. And like I said, each basin has three of these units.
The existing aerators, are they the original?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The plans have the date of 1978 on the plans.
Could you run through the number of units again? We have, how many basins?
2.
2 basins. Each one has how many aerators?
3.
3 aerators. So the 300,000 would replace
One aeration unit, 1 motor, 1 gearbox,
just one aerator
just 1 aerator.
for $300,000.
Yes, sir.
A motor, an impeller, and a controller.
And a gearbox.
You can almost buy a Ferrari for that.
Absolutely.
Were there multiple quotes, proposals given, or is there only limited? There's probably a limited number of contractors, suppliers that even provide this type of
I've got 2
mechanical.
so far. And like I said, one was $250,000 per unit, And one quote was a little bit higher at $283,000 a unit. This technology of mechanically aerating the water is what we have. When the plant was built, there are other technologies that you can use to put oxygen in the water. That would require a little more study to see if we could adopt a different technology, if it'd be more cost effective. But like I said, we use one basin at a time, and there are 3 aerators that aren't being used right now. So if we were to have a failure, we could just switch basins. So this isn't an emergency or anything like that, but just to be forward-looking and trying to maintain our facility, this was a concern.
So altogether, there's 6 of these aerators that need to be replaced at some point in time?
There are 6 of these aerators that are from 1980, correct?
6 of them. And this is just $300,000 for just one, to replace one of them?
Yes, sir.
And it'll give us some more oxygen until we replace the next one?
Correct.
Yeah.
And of those 6, how many are in working good condition of those 6 aerators?
To my knowledge, all 6 are working right now.
Okay.
We did a recent repair where we used some parts that had been replaced before. We put those back in service to get us up and running. But these units, they run continuously.
Right.
24/7. It's hard to predict, what they might do.
What are these impellers made of?
Steel.
Just steel, not titanium?
No, sir.
Something you saw.
Gold.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's roughly the dimension? What's the diameter of one of those impellers?
Oh, I don't know. 10 feet, maybe? It's pretty good size, about 10 feet in diameter.
Yeah, it's a big chunk of steel, no question about that.
Metal doesn't last long at your place, does it?
No, sir, it's a pretty corrosive environment.
So in the long run, we're looking at really $2 million,
Yes, sir.
because it'll cost more next year.
Correct. This one's a good one to talk about. It'll be easy. This is the PAA system that Bo had mentioned. We're using a new chemical. It's basically an acid like vinegar and hydrogen peroxide to disinfect the wastewater. Much, much safer than chlorine and sulfur dioxide that we've used in the past. It seems to be very effective. And we are renting, we're in a trial period right now. We haven't received our final approval from the state to use this new technology. But if we receive the approval, we're going to want to buy our own chemical dispensing equipment that meters this PAA out at a certain rate based on the flow through the plant. And currently we're paying $14,000 a year to rent the equipment from the manufacturer. And if we spend $10,000, we can buy our own equipment, set this equipment up in one of the buildings that was designed to do the old chemical, and then make money, save money, rather than renting.
And that would be considered a no-brainer, I assume.
That's why I like that.
Spend $14,000, spend $10,000, save $14,000.
Yes, sir. In 1 year.
Would this also do away with your need to comply with the process safety management program?
It would.
That will save a bunch of money too.
And it's safer for employees
Absolutely,
and the public.
very much so.
And what is the danger that it eliminates?
Chlorine gas.
Chlorine gas,
heavier than air. We're on a hill, and we've got a lake and a park close by. Anything else on this one? Okay, this is roll-up doors in our dewatering facility. 2 doors have been replaced. We've got 3 doors that haven't. They're original from when the building was built. And the doors are starting to corrode. Like the mayor said, it's a pretty corrosive environment. We got some holes in there. We have to keep the building heated in the wintertime because there's a lot of process pipes inside that could freeze. And we were wanting to replace a door a year. Or originally we thought for $25,000 we could replace the 4 doors that are the oldest and have all new doors. The one quote that I got was for $37,000, so 25 wouldn't do it. So we'd just replace 1 or 2 of the doors.
And that's per door, 25 per door.
The quote that I got from one company is $37,496, and that's to replace 4 roll-up doors.
So this might be more like 40,000 rather than 25,000.
Correct. Unless we just do 2 or 3 doors in 1 year. Any other questions about the doors?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we'll go into our last department for water and sewer construction and maintenance, and that would be Mr. Allen. And before he gets up here, this item he's about to go over, this is the one that we're talking about borrowing the funds on, or using fund balance to pay for half of it or all of it. So.
All right, before we get into that, share with y'all. The Water and Sewer Department takes care of 64.4 miles of sewer collection system with 6 employees, 7 counting myself part of the time when I'm in the field and can get out there to help the guys. We also take care of 154 miles of water line, including the triple district system. That is a pretty good amount of time and footage of pipes to be taken care of by a small group of guys. And I would like to thank Lonnie and Eric and the rest of the department heads as we do try to work together and help each other as we can. So appreciate it, guys. All right. This here is a back truck. It's used in our sewer system. We do not currently have one of these. With this purchase, if we was able to get it, we would be able to make our sewer line last longer, keep them cleaner, less stoppages. It would allow us to be able to do the cleaning that we do contract out as we have to, because per the state we have to do so much per year, and usually that's around $5,000 to $6,000 per day when we have a contractor come in to do those on the big lines. This machine would also help with some of the smaller water leaks to speed us up in our process. It comes equipped with a vac system with a high pressure wand that you can excavate the ground with on like smaller water leaks, things like that, which would create less damages to yards, and this and that, and possibly damage to other lines as cable, gas lines, things like that. Just a big help on being able to find those obstacles that's in our way for us to do our job in that. But with the with this equipment, like I said, it would be able, we could go out and do more manhole cleaning, jetting the sewer line, the big line systems, and be able to back out what debris, roots that's in the system, trash, paper, whatever's hung up through the old system and stuff. As the jet machine comes back, it would bring it back, and then it's got a vac system that actually puts that in the truck instead of just flushing it on down the line for it to get caught up somewhere else. Feel that this would be a real good progress and machine for us to have in our fleet of equipment so that we can better serve our citizens to help stop overflows and excuse me, and stoppages in our lines to help better with the sewer system and also with our water system. Any questions on it?
Two. First of all, you said it was $5,000 or $6,000 per day to contract people to come in, clean out.
And do what this truck can do.
And how many days a year do you think we use those?
Well, this year we had 1 day in there. We budgeted 7,000 for that.
Okay.
You know, we could go weeks and, you know, to get the system done. I mean, it totally, it could use it, you know, and, you know, like I said, we got a big system with a few guys, but, you know, as time and as we get downtime and stuff, we could create a schedule for jetting and manhole cleaning and, just better the flow of the system, and it would keep, you know, a lot of the other things going to the plant that we could capture with this truck too.
Does the state require us to clean out so much per year?
At least 10 to 12%, 10%.
And that's when we sometimes have to use contract workers for that.
Yes, and plus our jetter system that we have in place now, that when we go out to jet home lines and stuff when they have stoppages. And with the small machine, we do use that on the bigger lines, but it just it doesn't do what that big truck can do for the main lines, the big lines. It helps a lot on the homeowners lines and things like that. But we are able to count that as cleaning also throughout the year.
One last question. I've been out on some water breaks with y'all, and I know prior to being able to fix the leak, the break, 99% of the time you have to empty the whole of water. Will this help do that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean
And probably in a lot quicker time.
dirt, or
than-
whatever's in there, it'll bring out water. You know. Yeah, it'll move water and stuff more quicker than anything we have on hand now, except for maybe our big pumps that's made to use at the plant and stuff.
Alan, I recently had some issues at a rental property I own, and over the last year, I've spent $23,000 cutting the floor out of the basement, replacing that drain line because we had old corroded cast iron piping, and then out in the yard we had to replace the line. And of course, you corrected some issues where the city and my line connect together. There was some root buildup there. But I would assume this would help with the homeowner. You could go out, I know the homeowner's responsible for their line, but if this vac truck could possibly vacuum part of that line that where the homeowner's drain line and the city, main line connects, would it help some of these issues with homeowners? It would improve customer service, or?
Well, once in places where we could, this does come equipped with a line to be, excuse me, to be able to help with the small lines also. It would be a limited placement that you could use it for the small lines, just being able to get to where some of the clean outs are at due to, some of them's behind houses, and of course this truck wouldn't get there. But yes, to answer your question,
You could put a vacuum on a small line and it might be 15 feet on the homeowner's, that blockage might be on the property of the homeowner, but it might pull that blockage out of that line.
It possibly could,
Yeah.
yes, but as far as if you got the jetting head in and it's cutting in the water, it's definitely grabbing what's coming back instead of it going on down the line. You know, and that's the main object for something like it. But as that process is going on, yes, it possibly could pull from the other side too, you know, so. Not for sure exactly how that would, but I do know from the angle that the jetter's coming back from and it's pulling the water and the trash and what it roots or whatever, it's getting that out as it goes.
And we've never owned, the town has never owned a piece of equipment. This is a very expensive piece of equipment.
Yes.
The town has never owned anything like
We
this.
have
And right
never-
now, what you have is something that you pull behind your vehicle to?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's getting some age and wear and tear on it, which we'll see in the next slide. We're also looking at one of those too.
So you're saying last year we spent about $10,000 hiring somebody to do this?
Yes.
What are the alternatives? Are these things available, used? Could we contract with somebody to come in and do a certain amount of sewer cleaning for us each year instead of making a $600,000 investment?
Well, that's just it. You know, we budget a certain amount each year to be able to have some cleaning done. But if we have something of our own, at certain points, we'll have our whole system done, and then we can keep up with it better and keep it more manageable than just having little bits here and there,
So
where our
we
trouble spots.
would do the whole system in 1 year?
I don't think we could do the whole system in a year with everything else we got going on, but eventually we would get there.
Will we need another person on the staff to have the manpower to do this?
I mean, normally there'd be 2 guys running a truck, you know, with what we got going on. There's some days we got, excuse me, you know, plenty of people. And then there's days that we got so much going on that we don't have, one thing has to wait till we get done with another one to go do it. And then we end up being here, you know, so that's, I mean, you could use all the employees you can get at certain times, and at certain times you don't need as many. Just depends on what the day, you know, comes up with during the day, but that's kind of
It
hard.
just seems like to make a $600,000 purchase recommendation, equipment recommendation, there ought to be some pretty solid data justifying it. Somebody's got to pay for this. It's either our citizens on fixed income who have to pay sewer fees, sewage fees, or I don't know who else, but somebody's got to pay for it, and you know, what's the alternative to slapping $600,000 of debt or purchase price on our citizens or on our utility customers?
I mean, it's, at the end of the day, we just present ours, what we see is what would better help us to do the job and to better benefit the town for their system.
I'm
And,
talking about data, you know, I'm talking about data, alternative.
You know, and then we wait for the yes or no from the council.
Okay.
We could use it to, you know, help with that as far as the lead service. You know, to find them and stuff like that, but it just, you know. All right, I got one more. The top is our current jetter system we have now that, excuse me, that Paul had spoke of, he had seen us using. This machine, it is a 2008 model. And we use that pretty regular. Most of it is used for on the homeowners, small line size. And we have a lot of stuff that's out in the woods that we use it on too, as far as main lines. And this versus the truck, the truck has a whole lot more pressure, more water flow, and can just do a whole lot more than the trailer can. But we did look at having a skids system created to put on a truck an existing vehicle that we already have to better us to be able to get to places instead of pulling a trailer. With the current machine that we have, you can, it's kind of aggravating sometimes to get in and out. Like I said, it's 2008, it's getting some wear and tear. All the new units have more water capacity, more pressures, and more options as far as what you can and can't do versus what we have. So we've proposed to either look at a new skid system to go on the back of the existing truck or create this machine that we do have to go on into a skid system to go on a truck to better serve so we can get to places better.
Make it easier to get down in the woods. wouldn't it?
Yes, instead of trying to pull a trailer and load it with water and it pushing you all over the place through the right-of-ways and things like that.
Tell me the difference, please, Alan, of the Vector truck and the jetter.
The Vector truck has several different amenities as far as what it can and can't do. Like I stated, we can, as the Vector truck is doing the cleaning, when you're bringing the jetter and the hose reel back, the Vector truck has a suction system, and it's in the manhole. When it's coming back, it's sucking all the water into a tank, all the debris, the roots, the rocks, whatever it may be inside the sewer system. So when you get done, there's nothing to go on downstream to be hung up anywhere else. And like I said, it's got the capability of potholing for small water line leaks, looking for gas lines, anything like that when we're doing, like, say your water line service was leaking in your yard. Now we come in with a track hoe, we dig a hole, we have mud and dirt everywhere. With this, in places where it could be used, we could come in and do minimum damage to the yards and vac every bit up, bring in fresh dirt, put back in, then you don't have a muddy mess. So I mean, that's just, it's a number of different things that it can do, and you know, just trying to update times and get more stuff in that other municipalities has to help better the system and help better us do our jobs. Anything else? I think that's all I've got.
Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, that's it.
Mr. Weichel, let's take a break, sir, please. We'll break for 10 minutes.
This is the fund summary page. So we've gone through the operating, capital items, revenues. So this is going to summarize everything for us.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's set up similar to the general fund summary that we saw yesterday. So you've got your operating at the top with your 3 departments, the budgets that we just went through, the capital items below that, and then it totals those 2 items for $6.9 million. And then the revenues that we went over on Exhibit C, that breakdown is transposed here to $6.9 million. So your difference is 0. So you know, actually, we had a deficit in general fund of 564,000. Well, here, based on the rates that you're gonna see in a minute with the McGill rate study, the budget would be balanced at this point, and that's with all the capital items that we just saw. So if there's any changes, you know, that number will go up or down, but that's where we're sitting at right now. Any questions on that? That's where we want to be. That's good.
Yeah, that's good news.
Now, if we decide, you know, if council decides to go with that vac truck and we, instead of financing part of it, we pay for fund balance, then, you know, the difference would be that difference. But since we're financing it, we're bringing in that revenue, so it makes that a difference of zero.
And that could be paid out of the utility fund, is that correct? The vac truck?
Yeah, everything we're seeing here is utility funds, so that's a good point. Tax dollars do not pay for any of this that we just saw today. So that's
Okay.
all water and sewer sales. So we're not using any tax money to pay for any of these items. Okay,
We're using water and sewer utility fees.
correct. Yeah.
How long was the financing on the truck? The vapor truck?
5 years is what we were
5
proposing.
years.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the vac truck, is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if we don't finance it and we pay for fund balance, then we wouldn't have a debt service payment. So that debt service line would come down, and your fund balance number would go up because you're using fund balance. But all right. Any questions on this? Okay. So at this time, we got the summary. We've gone through everything. McGill will present the 10-year CIP, which will have, the first column, remember, will be the ones we just went through. And then they'll also present the rate study that will show the financial model and those graphs that come with that. So at this time, I will turn it over to McGill. And we've got RJ and Dale here with us today.
Well, good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to be with you today, and I think this is, I was counting a minute ago, I think this is our 9th year in a row of working on this plan together with the town, looking at that level of strategic planning that we found to be so beneficial for many of our clients that we work for in our client base. I do want to take just a moment there to speak about the intention of the plan and maybe some of the broad differences. I know we've talked a lot about details. You've seen a lot of specific numbers related to items that the utilities staff is requesting from council. But as a whole, this plan is meant to be a 10-year plan for viability of your utility system. And I've said to this council before, but I know we've got a few new members as well. This is, as we've said a number of times this morning too, this is an enterprise fund. This is a business that is separate from the general fund, that is meant and legislated by North Carolina, that needs to be operational in the black and needs to be overall viable. Now, that doesn't mean that we'll put money in the bank every single year. That doesn't mean that this system is going to operate in the black to build a massive bank balance and pay dividends to shareholders or anything like that. This is about ensuring that we all have clean water to drink for the long-term future. And so it's difficult to plan much beyond the 10-year window. And so that's where we really kind of draw the limit in how we plan. But all of that being said, everything that you see related to this plan is all about supporting that viability of the utility system as a whole. So I've kind of touched on a few of those points there, but what does this cover? This covers anything and everything that the utility system funds. And so that is water treatment, pulling the water out of the lake. That is wastewater treatment. That's treating the waste that flows to the treatment plant before it's discharged back into the river. That is water distributions. That's moving the water from the treatment plant to the tanks that support the system, and then from the tanks to individual customer meters. And then that's also the wastewater collection system, which is you flush the toilet, you're an in-town sewer customer, your flow goes out of your home's plumbing through the clean out near the street, and then it's into the city-owned or town-owned sewer main. And then there are also sometimes pump stations that are involved in the collection system itself to overcome gravity when we need to. So again, this is a separate fund from the general fund. It is meant to be self-supporting. And in the case for Valdese, most recent numbers are a little over 5,200 retail customers throughout your service area. And that includes some wholesale and some contract customers. That does not account for any of the wholesale customers, their customer base. In other words, that 5,200 does not count all the people who are actually customers of Eichard Water who indirectly get their water from the town of Valdese. That is just accounts who make their payments to the town of Valdese. And so it's also worth noting that of that 5,200, about half of those are in-town customers, about half of those are outside, either in, and we'll clarify a little bit of terminology for the rest of our discussion here today. Outside customers could be one of two things right now. That could be true outside customers who live, say, in the vicinity of Falls Road, Enon Road. They're not really in the town of Valdese, and they're not really in the old Triple District. They would be true outside customers, Valdese customers, but they're in neither district. We'll talk also about the Triple Community District. It's been mentioned once or twice already. Years ago, there was a private water corporation known as Triple Community, and when that system decided that they wanted to dissolve and give everything over to the town of Valdese in the 2010, 11, 12 era, that process took place, and so Triple customers by contract at that point in time were agreed to be served as in-town customer users. And so for that period of that contract, those customers were the same as if they were inside, even though they're in a different geographic location. All of that to bring that back to where I started this comment to say, of your 5,200 customers, roughly half of them are in-town customers, roughly half are outside of one kind or another.
Does that include industry?
It does, it does. They're included in that overall number. So the utility fund value as a whole, looking at that $5.7 million annual number. And of course that does fluctuate a little bit year to year. And I think it's important here too to stop and say, this is a plan, again, meant to support viability of the system. This is not your budget document. All the other exhibits that Bo's been showing you earlier this morning, those are your budget documents. And we synchronize and true those up as best we can year after year, looking at how things performed last year, even looking at how things are tracking this year to a certain point in time, maybe December, January kind of time frame, to just true up and make sure that everything is tracking the way we think it needs to be. But don't confuse some of the numbers that you see here necessarily with the budget numbers. Those will be the numbers that council has full ability to review, modify, make changes as you see fit as you complete your budget for the year. So let's talk just briefly about capital improvements planning. What constitute capital improvements planning? How does something wind up as an item on the capital improvements plan? And we'll see that list in just a little bit. I like to tell folks there are really four main areas that we recommend projects for the capital improvements plan. So that's going to be if a project addresses needs for viability, In other words, the aging equipment, the 1950s era valves at the water plant that Eric's talking about. They're aging. They're ready to be replaced. They don't last quite as long as some of us do, thankfully. It's also looking at out-of-date technology. If there's something that is truly obsolete, there's a better way to accomplish the task. We look at it from that perspective. And then if something's providing operational issues, if it's just not doing the job that it needs to do, those can be considered needs for viability. It also could be looking at efficiency needs. There are instances where perhaps an old 1970s era pump motor that has an electric motor that may be 600 horsepower connected load. That's a large electrical demand that the town has to pay a power bill for. We may be able to find ways to change how that pump operates. We may be able to find newer versions, newer models that have greater efficiency and can do the same job but use less horsepower, use less electricity, lower the town's costs. So if there are efficiency projects in the CIP, those are included. And then we also have times where there are projects in the CIP for growth needs. Those would be ones that would be related to assurance and capacity, or expansion of capacity, or perhaps expansion of service area. And so an instance like the Valdese Bluffs project that's on the docket that will be completed in the next couple of years, if everything stays on track with the developer, that's a project that is growth. That is new customers, that is new homes, new construction that are not currently on the system for Valdese. That'll also require some infrastructure extensions, a new pump station, water line extension, among other things. And in that case, specifically for Bluffs, the town did receive an earmark in the state budget to cover a significant portion of those costs for the pump station and the water service to the property. Everything inside the property, other than the pump station and force main, everything inside the property then would be the developer's responsibility to install, to take the water line through whatever routing and alignment that he picks for streets in that development. But that is a growth need. So that's a project that shows up on the CIP, even though it's also supported by external revenue. And then lastly, the fourth way that something can make it onto the project list for the capital improvements plan is through regulatory needs. If the federal government comes to the town and says, next year you're going to have to start removing PFAS from your wastewater effluent if you have it, that's a significant change in your operations, and that could require new processes, that could require significant capital investment. And so we would want to try to accommodate for something like that in the capital improvements plan. There are also other things that regulatory bodies can change, enforcing on the town. We like to use that term as an unfunded mandate. But in this case for Valdese, I mentioned the PFAS. That's not an imminent threat. That is one that could be down the road, because that's the new buzzword. That's the new trend in the industry, is to look at, and rightfully so, but that's the new trend in the industry where there's a lot more to be learned about what PFAS is doing to all of our water sources and water bodies across the country. So once we arrive at a capital improvements plan, then we want to look at how much money is going to be needed to accomplish that plan. And so looking at it from that perspective, it's looking at the revenues. We take a look at the historical revenues. We take a look at any of the, what I like to call organic growth. So the 1-2 houses that pop up in open lots somewhere in your territory, that would be akin to the new tap fees that we talked about earlier this morning. Those would be good examples of some of that organic growth. And then you could also take a look at rate adjustments. That's another way to realize that additional revenue over the life of the plan. And then we also look at expenses in that financial analysis related to salaries, benefits, operating expenditures, The fact that those chlorine cylinders are insanely expensive and only available from one supplier in all of America, those are things that really matter to your bottom line and the expenses that you incur in the plan. And then we look at the capital improvements plan itself, and we look at debt service. And those all become relevant to the overall financial plan and its trends up and down over time. So all of those revenues and expenses then have an impact on the fund balance. And Bo reported to everyone, I think at the beginning of the morning, what the fund balance is. And just think of that fund balance, just kind of as a reminder, that fund balance is meant to act like the town's checking account, if you will. So if at your house the refrigerator dies next week and you've got to go buy a new one, where's that money coming from? Hopefully, if there's a rainy day fund or something like that that you keep, then that's where that comes from. In the town's case, the fund balance acts like that checking balance, checking account acts like that emergency fund. It serves all those purposes. And so having a healthy fund balance is something that we certainly want to take a look at in that financial analysis. And when we get there, we'll talk about a few metrics, a few industry guidelines that we'd like to follow with every client that we do this effort for. So anytime we're preparing a model like this and projecting much beyond the next 6 months, it seems like anymore, anytime we make those kind of projections, there are assumptions and there are model inputs that are critical to steer the overall decision about the model itself. And so those can be revenue growth. We do factor in some minor growth for those additional homes that pop up and become new customers year over year. And then we also look at the impacts of rate adjustments. And then when it comes time to talking about expenses, we look at inflation. If you look at that consumer price index graph over to the right there, notice that the CPI itself in the 2018, 2019, 2020 range was, at or below basically 2%. And then in 2021, in a post-COVID world, we saw CPI skyrocket compared to the fact that in that same time frame, towns just like Valdese all over the country were losing revenue because folks didn't have money to pay utility bills, and legislative decrees went out that you've got to keep providing that service, but you can't cut somebody off right now because of COVID if they can't pay their bill. And while we all appreciate that compassion for individuals and their lives and their health, that puts a significant financial strain on utility funds just like Valdese. So that CPI is something to look at and realize that over time, the market changes what happens to this utility fund. So then also looking at, in the expenses section, we would be looking at debt strategies, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we recommend as healthy debt strategies for a system of Valdese size. And again, a few benchmarks to track how the town's progressing and how the plan tracks with those guidelines. And then, of course, we also do continue to take a look at that fund balance. We want to see that fund balance stay healthy. We want to see coverage ratios at appropriate levels so that we have good security in the overall viability of the system itself. And so with that, we're going to transition into looking at a couple of those benchmarks that are historical, and I'll let Dale cover those.
Morning, my name is Dale Sheepers with McGill Associates. I spent a lifetime before my tenure here at McGill as a public works director, utility director for about 30 years. So I've been on this side of the microphone a lot. Systems from 1,500 connections to about 25,000 connections. What I find is that whether you're big or small, the same pressures are exerted on you no matter what your size is. One of the most critical pieces of the discussion is the capital plan. It's the most expensive thing that you're going to have to deal with. We talked about the Ferrari versus the aerator in terms of cost. Those costs are real, they're out there, we need to be aware of those things. and we need to plan accordingly. Our goal is to have a sustainable utility fund as we move forward, okay? And the way that we do that is that we set up a financial model that is based on a test year. So what we do is we take all that historical information that RJ talked about a little bit, and we look at the FY24 budget, then all of our known and predictable variables that could affect what we budgeted in '24 and what we actually see in '24, we take those into account and develop what we call a test year. And what that test year does is it gives you a reliable starting point to then forecast for the next 10 years. Okay, if we set that number a little too low or a little too high, the trajectory going 10 years can have a lot of error out here. So we need to be mindful of that, and each year we take a look at our year-to-dates and those sorts of things, along with Bo and others, to make sure that we set that test year as accurately as we can to predict forward. Okay, so as we do that, question often becomes, okay, what is the overall health of our utility? There are a number of benchmarks, industry standard type benchmarks that are available that I've kind of looked through and sorted through and things, and selected just a few that are kind of high level, big picture sorts of benchmarks to kind of look at the overall health of the utility fund as we look at the past, how we've tracked over the last several years, you'll see here on the exhibit, and then what it looks like going forward. Okay, first one being operating ratio is basically your revenue divided by your expenses. Okay, so if that number is 1 or higher, you're making more money than what you're spending in rough terms. Okay, so you're right around the target of 1. You'll see that it's dips a little lower for a couple, 3 years, not much, but a little bit. And again, that's what the purpose of the fund balance is, right? If you have a little negative net income in a certain year, you draw a little bit from fund balance. If it's a little on the positive side, then a little more money goes into fund balance. So that's kind of the regulating piece of the model that keeps us in alignment. Okay, then the next thing, speaking of the fund balance, the next one is the days working capital. Well, that is a translation of the amount that's in your fund balance and how many days of total operating expenditures you can survive with 0 income. So in other words, if nobody paid a bill for the next year, for the next day and forward, then we see in 2024 that that's roughly 200 days of money in the bank that we could operate our system with without collecting any revenue from any users. Okay, so that's a benchmark. We take a look at that. 120 days is kind of a minimum, if you will, and in other utilities, I've seen this as high as 600 days. Now, it's a balance, okay? If we had 600 days, if we had, a little less than 2 years of cash in our checking account, one might ask, are our rates a little too high if we have this kind of money set aside or available in a fund balance, okay? So there's a bit of a balance here to say what's reasonable, what makes sense, and then the next question is how do we manage it moving forward? So these are some benchmarks we've used over the last several years. On staff level, this is not town policy or anything like that. These are some suggested benchmarks that we've used from that perspective. A couple other ones that I think are important. Next one is sufficiency of revenue above debt. So another question that comes to mind and is a concern always is how much debt is too much? Have we borrowed too much money? Is this manageable? Is this affordable? I mean, we wrestle with that in our own personal finances too. I can take a credit card and spend a lot of money, but then when it comes time to pay it back, you quickly realize perhaps what is manageable and what is not manageable. Okay, some industry benchmarks place that money as about 25% is a target that says if our debt payments are above 25% of our total revenue, we're probably a little heavy on debt. Okay, you'll notice that our numbers are very modest, single digits for quite a ways along the graph, with a little additional debt issuances forecast for the next couple of years. We're still maintaining something that's very comfortably below that benchmark number. Okay, then the last one that I have here is debt service coverage ratio. And what this is a measurement of the capacity of the utility fund to incur additional debt. So in other words, if you have to incur additional debt, if that's one of the strategies that we're looking at, how comfortable are we with issuing additional debt? How much capacity do we have in our fund as we're projecting forward to accommodate that? And again, we're very comfortable. The target is 1.2. That's pretty much an industry standard. I've seen some of them that are slightly higher, but right in that range of about 1.2 is the minimum. If you're below that, you don't have capacity to issue additional debt. Okay, if you're comfortably above that, about twice that amount. So as we're looking at different strategies on how to manage our capital plan, what do we spend cash on? What do we issue debt for? How much debt do we issue, presumably, as we move forward? What would that look like? How would that measure up to our ability to afford to do that? Okay, so the benchmarks demonstrate that we're looking pretty good in all four of these areas that we've looked at. We do have a good ratio of revenue versus expenses in these areas that we've benchmarked. So next question becomes, in comparison to some of our neighbors, what do our rates look like today? What you'll see here is average monthly combined water sewer bill. Okay, and that is, the average here in Valdese is somewhere just a little bit more than 3,000 gallons. So we take 3,000 gallons as a benchmark. How do we compare with the utilities that are listed here? Okay, you'll see a little dash line over to the right. What that is, the North Carolina, University of North Carolina School of Government Environmental Finance has a rates dashboard. And what they do is that is a clearinghouse for rates and related financial data for about 460 utilities across North Carolina. So the median value among all of those utilities for the state of North Carolina is that $63 and, or is it $65.18. Okay, so that's the median value across all of those utilities across the state, which means that there's an equal number that are above that and an equal number that are below that. You'll notice that Valdese is well below that median value as we look at the neighboring utilities and how we stack up here in Valdese.
How much was Newton on that?
If you would go back to that and
Yes.
discuss that, the rates for the various municipalities, the difference, what they are,
Okay.
because some of us can't see that.
Okay, I'm sorry. So,
This is a P.
How's that?
That's good.
I'm
Okay.
there with you.
that better?
No.
No?
Take it down.
Okay, so the blue part of the bar is the water portion of the bill. The green is the sewer portion of the bill. Oh, excuse me, sewer portion of the bill, and then the total out to the right. Okay, so a 3,000 gallon bill in Newton would cost you $69.94 per month.
69?
Yeah, 69. In Granite Falls, that would be 61.51. Hickory, 53.16. Valdese, 46.80. And then Morganton was a little less than that, at 43.51.
But in short, Valdese has the highest water rate of any of them.
For 3,000 gallons of water, yes. The water portion of the 3,000 gallon bill is a little higher in Valdese than the others.
And I think it's worth noting too, when you make that observation, Valdez also has the lowest sewer bill of any of those. So it's always, again, a bit of a balancing act. Sewer is always gonna be a cost center, not a revenue center, when you're looking at utility funds. But the proportion there of expenses versus the revenue is a little bit out of whack for Valdez compared to some of the others. Again, overall, the number is what it is, and folks pay one bill. But just looking at those breakdowns does tell you a little something too.
Yeah, but the point is, Valdese water customers pay more for water than Morganton, Hickory, Granite Falls, and Newton customers pay for their water. Sewer, clearly sewer is a different matter. A lot of Valdese residents don't even have sewer systems, they have septic tanks. So sewer only applies to those who have both sewer and water service.
Correct.
Yeah, we understand that.
Is there a reason Morganton's water is significantly lower than everybody else's?
Well, you do look at Morganton's sewer there. It is, other than Hickory and Granite Falls, it's the next highest one in that group. Morganton is a comparable system for overall volume. The one thing that Morganton does have that Valdez does not, that impacts a lot of things, in overhead, even at City Hall, those kind of things, is an electric utility. So cities, those are what they call those member communities, tend to always have a different scale really of overall utility service, just because of that additional, it's a separate utility fund, not in the water sewer fund, but it provides them other benefits in a roundabout way that straight water sewer utilities don't have.
I think too, that is the reason we talk about Drexel's tax rate, is because they also get quite a bit of income from their electrical cities.
Okay.
Before you jump into this, let me just
Yes, sir.
make a question or comment. How long has McGill been preparing these 10-year plans for the town of Valdese?
This is the 9th year.
9th year, yeah. Two comments about that. I mean, second one's sort of tongue-in-cheek. But the first one is, for now 9 years, I've been impressed of the extent and the thoroughness of this 10-year utility plan that the town publishes. And I've thought and I've advocated and I've spoken to a lot of people, my opinion on that, which is, what a shame the town wasn't doing the same thing with all of its operations, where it had the entire general fund operations on a 10-year business plan. We have 10-year capital improvement plans, but not a 10-year business plan. So that's great that we have this plan, and they're thorough. I know you're getting paid to produce them, but it's money well spent. The tongue-in-cheek comment is, thankfully, you were not responsible for the plan that had the septic system in it. So good for you.
Yes, I think that was probably in an era where the plan was lacking. So in any case, we appreciate the sentiment there, and I think to that point, we do this for an increasing number of our clients. There have been a smaller number who have been engaged in this kind of a planning activity for a while, and I think overall, just I want to give the impression that Rates are certainly something we want to always be sensitive to the ratepayers in Valdese. I live in Valdese. I pay these rates, you know. So I want to be sensitive to that from the customer's perspective. But I think it's also worth noting that, you know, Valdese in this case is accomplishing a real plan to make sure that we all have these services for at least the next 10 years and even beyond. And we're doing so, accomplishing projects, doing work, and still managing to find ourselves in the bottom 25% of that graph I've got there. Now, you could go scour the websites and find other places that have dirt cheap rates that are cheaper than Valdese, but they're not doing the work. They're not investing in their system. They're not managing their system for the long-term health the way that Valdese is doing by accomplishing this plan. So that's the thing for me as a citizen even that's encouraging, and the thing as a professional doing this for other municipalities as well, where I see those places that really buy into this process and follow the plan tend to track better over time than those that stick their head in the sand and ignore and just say, we can't raise rates, we can't find new revenue, we can't do projects. You know, you're gonna have to find another way. But we gotta be reasonable. But I think that's important to say that, you know, it makes me pleased to know that Valdese is in that category where we're taking the bull by the horns and gonna manage the process.
Yeah, we do understand that it is an enterprise, it's separate from the general fund, but I think also the town council is responsible for it. And
Exactly.
if the town crashed for some reason, it would still be the Valdese property owners and taxpayers who would be responsible for it. And in some municipalities in North Carolina, they've got overextended with their utility enterprise, and to the extent where they virtually went bankrupt, and the local government commission had to come in and take them over and get them straightened out. But the taxpayers do have the ultimate responsibility, and to that point, the taxpayers who are paying, residents who are paying Valdese taxes are also the ones who are paying half of the water fees. So that's why when we get into the fee structure, the council has a responsibility for the fees and the differential between inside and outside fees. So
Yes, sir.
please continue.
One thing I'll say is, we in the past have been able to wake up in the morning and turn the TV on and see water facilities in other municipalities that has failed. Flint, Michigan's a prime example. I think it's Jackson, Mississippi, a prime example. I think there's been one or two in North Carolina that has failed to provide the clean water to their citizens that we are responsible for. And I want to tell you, RJ and Dale, that I appreciate McGill keeping our water clean, helping us to devise a 10-year plan and keep us moving forward. Because if we're not moving forward, if we're not providing, probably clean water is the most important service we provide. And if we can't do that, then we need to lock the doors and go home.
Certainly.
Sorry.
So to that end, the handout that we've given you all, and we didn't number our exhibits necessarily in Bo's format, but you've got a stapled set of documents there in front of you, and that is the often mentioned this morning 10-year capital improvements plan. So to Dale's point, that is basically the 10-year list of projects and equipment expenses, if you will, to be covered by this overall financial plan. And so that is the single biggest influence that you have in the revenue analysis and in your futures, both in the expense side and also in managing the equipment side to make sure that everything is still viable. So this is far too long for us to go through item by item. We'd be here longer than the 4 hours that's been scheduled for this session, and I don't intend to make it painful for anybody. But just know that plan to cover a few highlights so that you can continue to review at your leisure. It is, like I said, a 10-year plan. So you see in that first column, the test year, that is 2024. That's the year that Dale was referencing a little bit ago. So that is based on the council's previously adopted budget for this current fiscal year, including any true-ups or adjustments that have been made based on things that we know that have happened since the budget was adopted and since this, the snapshot in time where we prepared this document. And so that runs through, I think, generally we've done it through like December. So that catches about half the year by the time where we've really got to kind of put pen to paper for these type efforts. And so you look at that test year, and that becomes the basis, the starting point of your projection for the life of the plan. And so then you look in the columns to the right of there, and you've got FY1 all the way through FY10, and then it's got the associated calendar year there below. And so what that winds up being is a schedule of when expenses or when projects would take place. And we try to spread those out into accounting for actual needs. So we're not replacing something, inside the 10-year window that doesn't need to be replaced inside the 10-year window. And so the rolling schedule of how things are managed in that, are relative to, when was it last new? When was it last improved? And then also beyond that, it takes into account problem areas, problem projects, or improvement projects. How do we make the system pressure more sustainable in the southwest section out near Mole Elementary in the Triple District? How do we improve water quality out there? What are the projects that are going to make that happen? You'll also notice in this overall list, there are a number of large projects included. Take for instance one of those that council acted on, I think last meeting, was to pass a resolution to apply for CDBG funding. That's the one on that first page right there in pretty much the middle of the page, fiscal year 28. That was a $3 million project plugged into the CIP. That's because that's the maximum amount that grant from the state will award. And so the color designation there is indicative of that being an outside funding source. So we want to capture all the work we do in the CIP, but in instances like that CDBG, elsewhere in the financial model, we plug in a revenue source that is outside of the town's rate structure. In other words, it's grant money. So we make sure that we account for that in the appropriate place elsewhere. There has been a little bit of discussion this morning too about different items in like some of the budget requests that staff has presented to council this morning. I will say all of those items that were included in the requests that you saw this morning are included in fiscal year 25 of this CIP, and so therefore also supported long-term by the financial analysis.
Now that was a question I have. I looked at that Vector truck.
Correct.
It's here.
Correct. So it is planned in the CIP.
Right.
That is not tying council's hands necessarily to move forward with that, or with any project in this list for that matter. But this is just making sure that the finances are there to cover that purchase if the council moves in that direction.
Let me ask you something else. I see number 22, the Holly Hills sewer system extension. Holly Hills doesn't have sewer now?
Holly Hills is a different setup.
It's in the town, isn't it?
It is in town limits. That's my neighborhood actually, but that is in town limits, but folks there have the option to pay a sewer bill because they are on septic. And as you can see way out to the right, that's an expensive project to get sewer service out there like it would be everywhere else in town. When the town annexed Holly Hills, I think the agreement was that they weren't going to provide a true sewer service out there, but if folks paid a sewer bill, then they could every year 2 years, something like that, the town would come and pump out septic tanks for those customers. So they are water and sewer rate payers, and they're in town, but there is technically not gravity sewer lines out there. They're individual systems.
So if I understand you correctly, if I had a septic tank and lived in Holly Hills, it's the town's responsibility to pump that out?
When the homeowner requests it.
When the
On
homeowner,
a schedule of I can't remember the number, if it's every 12 months or 24.
okay.
Could you run down the test year column for us, just confirm if those acquisitions have already been made or if they've not been made?
Yes, I would probably call in a little bit of help there from staff as far as which have been actually purchased.
Yeah, we'll start right on the first page. You got $90,000 for a
Track code
mini
purchase.
track hole, yes. Has that been purchased?
Yes,
We've already got that?
yes,
Yes.
So how many mini track holes do we have now?
3,
We have 3.
yeah.
And so then we go to page 2, going down that column, we have,
Now, one of the tractors is in street department for their work, so we have 2.
that's a different company than this.
Correct.
That's the total.
2 within the utility company.
I'm not making a comment. All right, so the roof replacement, has that been done for the, I don't know what roof replacement was, something,
Finished water pump station.
pump station, okay. Has that been finished?
That's not been finished yet.
I'm sorry?
That has not been finished.
That has not been finished.
Okay, so that's not yet. Okay, and then we go to page 3. We have a dump truck to take compost to customers. Has that been purchased?
No, that has not been purchased.
Not yet. And then we have a new sludge trailer.
Has not been purchased.
Not yet. And then we have centrifuge overhaul units. 2 units, 53,000.
53.2 for the 2 centrifuge overhauls.
Plant upgrades.
That's number 2, yeah. Has not been done.
Not yet.
Which one?
That's going to be line number 9 on that 3rd page.
Right. Okay.
And that just, I didn't get there yet, but there are 3 pages of the CIP. You have this, matching corresponding departments from who you've heard this morning. So you've got distributions and collections, and then the 2nd page is the water plant specific. 3rd page is the wastewater plant specific. So they're kind of broken up by those groups. But all of those roll up into the totals at the bottom of the 3rd page. And so kind of one thing I want to make sure council understands in that is, where do these numbers come from? So that is a answer of, we like to tell folks the engineering answer is it depends. If it is an equipment purchase, like the aerators that you heard about at the wastewater treatment plant, if that's an equipment purchase that can be removed and replaced under the formal threshold of North Carolina formal purchase, those kind of things, then oftentimes staff will go get multiple quotes to just replace those, and they don't become a true formal bid capital project. If it's a project more like the CDBG project, and you've got external funding sources, and it's a larger project, much more significant dollar value, those tend to be more engineering estimates. And so that's the kind of projects that we spend more time with, developing a real idea of what cost is going to look like to complete the entire project. So your smaller things, your equipment purchases, your vehicle purchases, they're going to be based on information that staff can get, and the larger ones are going to be ones that we put more time and effort into planning those project costs.
So with a big item like that $600,000 Vector truck, somebody decided that it should be budgeted as a new piece of equipment. Somebody decided that it was better to get one than it is to contract the services out. Someone decided that we shouldn't look for used equipment. Was that McGill Associates or is that not McGill Associates that made those decisions, that made those recommendations?
That one in particular is looking at staff recommendations and how to approach that. I think from our perspective, knowing how other folks are doing that, it is often a contract services, just like the town is utilizing now to accomplish those. Having that piece of equipment in your arsenal, so to speak, obviously has its benefits, recognizing it comes with a significant price tag, but the opportunities for kind of interlocal government sharing or favors or things like that back and forth are really honestly unheard of. So it winds up being usually folks either own their piece of equipment or they're going to contract for those services. But the number itself and the quote was based on staff reaching out and asking for quotes on the equipment that they're looking for.
Bo, how much are we spending on contracting for that vac? Do you know?
I think the number that Councilman Harvey and Alan were talking about before was like $7 to $10 grand, somewhere in that range.
How much?
What was the question?
That Vector truck, that 600, how much are we paying contractual now to have that done?
I think in the budget is 7,000 we put in there. Alan, yes, it's 7,000
per year, or?
Yeah, but that just
Okay.
gives us a minimum, meet the state's minimum requirements. So
And what are the minimum
I think
requirements?
it's 10% of our lines.
It's what now?
10% of our lines.
Okay,
So
I think y'all said that
Yeah.
earlier. Yeah.
So the reason why it's in there is we feel it'd be a better service to our customers to have cleaner lines. And by doing that, we'd be able to do it in-house instead of contracting more than just 10%. So that's why it's in there. Yeah, so.
So I will note too, as we're looking at the CIP table, I mentioned we have years 1 through 10. We also have on the far right of each one of those sheets a column that is years 11 through 15. Those are projects that we have identified a need for somewhere in the distant future. For instance, at some point, the current arrangement with Holly Hills is not going to be viable long-term, beyond somewhere off in the distance. Where in the distance, we don't know. But we put it there in that 11 plus just to identify that there are needs out there that are not included in the 10-year financial window. Okay, so that's the important part of that, is to understand the financial plan that we talk about in a little bit, and the financial performance of the fund is limited to the 10-year window. Those projects in 11 plus add significantly to the overall project costs, but they don't impact the 10-year financial analysis. They're just projects we're keeping an eye on for the future. Another instance of that is a good one at the wastewater plant. At some point, the town is going to have to accomplish a significant project with biosolids. That is the sludge material that's left over after treatment process is complete. Right now, the town composts all of that sludge, and then they distribute it to homeowners who may want it, because at that point it is pasteurized to the point where it is safe for use on landscaping beds and things of that nature, and that's all federally regulated. But the town has found in recent years that finding folks who want that compost product is growing shorter and shorter. That list is dwindling. And so at some point you're going to have to begin disposing of that compost in another way. Sending it to a landfill produces tipping fees and gets very expensive very quick. There are other strategies and other equipment, however, that can greatly reduce the overall volume of sludge that has to be disposed of. And so you'll notice if you flip over to the third page of that CIP, line item 46, it's the next to last line there, all the way out there in 11 plus, that's a $20 million project price tag. And so that's a good example of, we look at what we anticipate the cost for that work today would be, and then we escalate that cost value for time all the way out to 2035. So just know that there are significant projects out there like that biosolids project that someday are going to have to be handled one way or another, but they're not currently in this 10-year window. And so if there's no other questions kind of on specific projects, and we can certainly come back to that as well if you'd like, but for now, if there are no other questions on specific projects, I would call your attention to the very bottom of that third page, the second column with costs in it over it. It says 10-year CIP costs, and then all the way down at the bottom, $35,321,900. That is the total value of all equipment, all projects, everything within the 10-year window that this plan seeks to fund. So in essence, that's $35 million worth of work that the town would accomplish in the next 10 years according to this plan. And I'll just say, this is a plan, right? We've never prepared one that didn't change some. The plan we prepared for the town 9 years ago looked different than the plan that we have in front of us today. Things change with time. So it's the kind of thing where it does pay to spend time to renew that plan and make sure that it's concurrent for your needs, every year. But for right now, that's the view forward of projects to be accomplished in the window.
I do have a couple questions. A question on two items that are beyond fiscal year 25. Items under, lines 14 and 17.
Are you on the first page?
First page.
Okay.
Yeah, first page, 14 and 17. The Rutherford Street Water and Sewer, and then the Mount Home Hawkins Loop. Could you just give us a general idea of what those are about? Is that pump stations, or is it sewer lines, or water lines, or what is that?
So let's start then with 14, the Rotary Street Water and Sewer. The town currently has water and sewer service on that street. The difficulty there is that the sewer is actually in behind houses, not in the street, even though there is a line in the street, and we can talk more about that in a second. But the line that serves the residents in those houses on that stretch of the street, the lines are in the backs of houses, and it's on both sides. That would not be a problem if that line was sized adequately, but that is a 4 or 6 inch sewer main collecting flow from multiple customers. And by North Carolina rule, if you're collecting flow from multiple customers, it's got to be a minimum 8 inch size sewer main. So this is a project to replace those undersized lines in the backs of those houses.
So, and those lines, I assume, serve some of the businesses up there near Main Street, is that correct?
I believe that's where it gets to be tricky. There is a line in the middle of that section of Rotary Street that runs down the hill. The problem is it is very deep, like 20 feet deep, and so inaccessible really for staff to ever maintain. And how it wound up that deep is another one of those long time ago decisions that I don't know the answer to. But that main line that is deeper is the one that's collecting the flow from businesses up on the corner, like with Main Street. So it's you got multiple lines there to serve the same area. It's just unfortunate that the residences there are impacted by undersized lines in their backyards.
And then there is some land just west of Rotherham Street, some vacant land. How is that served by a sewer line?
I believe that main line goes down to the end of Rotary and may turn west. So it could, that line, when it gets down to the bottom of Rotary, is shallow enough at that point that it would be more feasible to connect to it if that other vacant parcel were to need to develop.
So if there were to be a development of that property, I guess that's between Fayette and Rotary, I think is where it would be.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the topo in that area, but just knowing visually how the street falls back in through there, I would expect that that big main line
It
would
could
be.
be served by the main sewer line. And I know that sewer line goes the whole way down through the woods into no man land. Okay.
Right, and so that's a good example too. You know, that's a project that we could certainly come up with a project if we knew there was a need, right? But there is no imminent need. It doesn't meet one of those 4 criteria we were talking about, so it's not in the CIP. But if somebody comes to the town and says, I want to develop that, then that's when we would take a closer look at, is this going to work? How will it work? What kind of cost do we think you're looking at?
And then the Mount Hope Hopkins Loop.
Yes, Mount Home Hawkins Loop. That is out in the Triple District. That is Mall community. You have a number of smaller sized dead-end lines in that vicinity. And so flows and pressures are, let's just say, they're not inadequate, but they're more marginal. And so there are state regs that require certain minimum criteria that you meet, but you do have instances in time where heavy demands could cause decreased pressures for folks in those areas. Additionally, if you have a failure in that old system that was not only way back when without much of a plan, but it was also done by somebody else who was really only looking at the absolute bottom dollar price, you've got some thin wall PVC pipe out there. If you have a significant break in one of those main lines, you could have a large number of your customers out of water until it's repaired. So this loop provides hydraulic improvement and redundancy in the event of one of those significant breaks.
And that's not anywhere near the Berrytown project?
No, sir. No, this is over in Mall community, south of 40 and down Old 18.
Thank you.
Certainly. Any more questions on the CIP itself? If not, I'm going to let Dale step back up and we'll flip to the 4th page, which is the financial model output summary sheet.
Okay, so the old saying is, here's where the rubber meets the road. Okay, we've got a capital plan, well thought out, scheduled in such a way that meets the needs of the utility, rehabilitation, and other things in a manageable way, in an intelligent way. We're not going to do too much until we have to, but we have to do enough to make sure that we're not kicking the can down the road and causing bigger problems later on. So what you see in front of you is an output from the financial model, which is the result of a revenue requirements analysis. Revenue requirements analysis says that we've captured all the costs of the utility for the next 10 years. Okay, so what kind of revenue is necessary to accommodate those expenses in that scheduled list of those capital items that we have over time, including normal inflation based on the types of expenses, expenses for salaries and benefits are going to go up a little bit more than other types of expenditures. So those are all, okay. So those are all factored into the model. And what you have in your handout is the summary page. Part of that summary page is on the display, which is a graphical representation of the expenses in the columns and the revenue in the lines. Okay, dashed line is existing rates. Don't do anything with the rates. The dashed line goes across and you can see that there are much more expenses above the dashed line than what you have revenue to support. Okay. So the object here is that the solid line is the total amount of revenue that is required. So in other words, the line stays above the bars, right? Revenue stays above expenses over the 10-year period, and that becomes the proposed amount of revenue to, or the requirement to support the plan over the 10-year period. Okay, in the handout, what I have in addition to this is a tabular display of what those numbers are for each of those components. So in other words, you'll find in the handout, you have revenue described as the operating revenue with existing rates, which is the dashed line running across the graphic. Then you'll also have projected operating revenue, which is the solid line that runs above the columns. Okay, the difference between those two is the new revenue that is projected by rate adjustments. So that's the revenue requirement is the difference between those two. That'll be the third entry in the top section of the tables. It says new revenue, and that accumulates over time as we move from left to right. You'll see that operating revenue on existing rates does grow just slightly. I think our projection on that was like 0.5% per year of, or what's termed organic growth in the system. So we get a little tiny bit of additional revenue with new customers connecting. The balance of what we're going to need is with revenue adjustments, i.e. rate adjustments to get us there. Okay, real quickly, looking at the operating expenses, we have 4 major components of that are listed, and the dollar amounts listed across the table. Those things stack up into the expense columns that are in the graphic. Okay, so as you look through that, you'll see that we have some existing debt service, number 3 in the list, and you can see that those numbers correspond to what Bo presented in the tables that he provided for fiscal year 25. So those numbers are going to be in very close alignment to what he has, some rounding for my model to make it a little easier to read, and so forth. Then if you add up all the expenses, we have a amount of expenses to cover, which is in that next table, and sandwiched right in between there is the revenue amount in terms of a percentage that needs to be in addition to your existing rates in order to support the plan, to cover those are the required revenue at those particular fiscal year intervals to pay the bills, pay all the bills, including the capital investment. Okay, so we notice that in fiscal year 25 overall, revenue adjustment, revenue increase is 15.1%, followed by 12 in 26, and then we settle down pretty quickly to about a 3% revenue adjustment from there through the end of the model. Okay, and that's kind of inflation at that point. Okay, so we have a bit of a hill to climb to begin with, but then we level off into more inflationary type adjustments from those years forward. Okay, so then we have an effect on average customer bill. Again, that's the 3,000 gallon combination water sewer bill of an inside customer. Currently is $46.80. You can see at fiscal year 25 that would go to $50.85, a difference per month of $4.05. And then you can see as the table progresses from left to right that the second year there's almost a $5 increase in monthly, in that same monthly bill, but then in 27 that falls back to $1.75 and so forth across the rest of the 10-year planning period. Okay.
Where is the breakdown between residents and non-residents on these fees?
Okay, this is the total revenue requirements. The next step in the analysis is cost of service, which is what you're talking about.
Are we gonna see that today?
We will get to that in just a moment. Okay, so then the last piece of the tabular data here above the chart in your handout is the fund balance. So my projection of the fund balance at the end of fiscal year '24, Bo showed you what it was at the beginning of FY '24, right about $4 million. So the percentage of fund balance as the percentage of total expenses to cover is 64%, corresponding closely to what Bo showed you was 69%. Okay, as we move across in the 10-year period, you'll see that that stays pretty steady all the way across, ending at 59% out in year 10. Okay, again, that's your kind of your unrestricted cash reserve that is available to make up for a difference in, perhaps in a cooler summer, you wouldn't sell as much irrigation water and the revenue could be down a little bit. That's what fund balance is for, to take up that difference. And other things that perhaps are not anticipated or would not normally be foreseen in a projection, that fund balance can help you manage.
One of the things that come into play that we've seen in the past is drought. I think our water system suffered significantly as far as sales or income because we limited people quite extensively on what they could and could not use water for. Kind of like what you were talking about, cooler summers.
Yep, exactly. And in this analysis, there's no consideration of changes to the rate structure or anything of the like. This is continue with the same rate structure across the board, addition to rates to generate that amount of revenue. Okay, so good segue here into the next, if I could get the slide to move.
Okay, so that previous table was the revenue requirements. Remember that. That is overall how much money do we need to make the plan work. And so then when we start talking about revenue adjustments, we get more fine and more direct to individual customer classes. And historically, the town's appetite for rate adjustments has just been to more or less apply adjustments uniformly. So if you need 8%, it's 8% across the board. With more recent council action, we did take a look this year at adjusting inside rates and outside rates independently. And so what that turns into is a strategy for accomplishing that overall goal. Looking at where rates are today, an inside customer's rate is set at its value, and then an outside customer rate is approximately 1.4, 1.42 times an inside customer rate. And again, remember I said at the beginning, terminology matters. That's an outside customer. So that's one of those folks who's not inside town limits, but who's also not a triple district customer.
There's not many of those, are there?
There are not. There's a couple hundred of those throughout your entire customer base. So you're not talking about a significant population. The current triple community customer rate is a multiplier of 1.0 to inside water customers. So still maintaining 1.0 currently. And that was per that original contract when the town assumed that system. And we actually went back and had the attorney to review, make sure that we were operating within the permissions of that agreement to talk about changing that multiplier. But for the life of that agreement and its original period, that number was required by that agreement to be 1.0. And so now we have the opportunity, based on his interpretation of that agreement, to change that multiplier. So with that in mind, we are looking at an approach with this set of recommended adjustments that has a 2-year transition period to get outside customers and those old triple customers to true up together, and to also be a total multiplier of 1.5 times inside rates. So in other words, over the next 2 years, there's a stepwise approach in the rate numbers we recommend, and that's all built back into the financial plan to support getting those folks, half the way there this year, half the way there next year, to get them to that 1.5 multiplier for anybody, water customer outside of town.
Why 1.5?
Well, historically, the outside customers were targeted for 1.5. And so absent of council direction to go above 1.5, we felt like that was the reasonable number to target for now. If council would decide that they wanted to go higher than 1.5, it is also, I'll say, industry-wide accepted for outside customers to often pay as much as 2 times 2.0 multiplier.
That's not a good number to me.
And so if you do that, then it just generates additional expense to those customers. It generates additional revenue to the overall utility fund, and would certainly be, I don't know the best way to phrase it, but it would be in addition to anything that's been included in the plan thus far, to the town's benefit, as far as financially speaking goes.
Yeah, and I think that's significant because, as we have established, the Valdese taxpayers are ultimately responsible for this utilities enterprise. And just to use my personal example, which is the only one I have at the moment, I pay Valdese taxes, I pay Valdese utility fees, gladly in both cases, gladder when they go down, but right across Laurel Street from where I live are people who are not paying Valdese property taxes. They're paying the same utility fees as me. And then beyond them, we have Springwood, and those people are paying Valdese property taxes, and they're paying, I think maybe you live there, and you're paying the same water and sewer fees, well, water fees anyway, as those people who are county residents and not Valdese residents. So, and these people, but between these two subdivisions, that's not, I mean, there may only be 200 of those kind of people in the area, but that's still a significant number. And those people are using our sidewalks, they're using our streets, they're going to our free family night concerts. They're benefiting from everything that, in fact, they call themselves Valdese residents. And they are, in fact, except when it comes to paying taxes. And then, on the other side of that, other end of that spectrum, we have some people whose utility fees are higher than their property taxes. I mean, that might sound to me amazing, but if you've got somebody in a small home and they're paying $70 a month utility fees, that's over $800 a year in property taxes. I mean, in utility fees, they may not be paying property taxes that high. So there's a great disproportionate load of cost load
Right.
of
And that,
providing water to 5,200 customers, some of whom are already, half of whom are already paying property taxes.
yeah, and I think there's a couple of things there I want to kind of speak to. Number one, if there are customers on, I think the other side of Michael, you're talking about the other side of Laurel, who are not in town limits, it would be worth double checking the financial records to make sure they are paying the appropriate rate, because if they're not in town limits, they would be considered a outside customer. Now, whether or not all of the financial software is set up perfectly to bill them correctly or not, I don't know. But to your point, yes, they're in close proximity. Ultimately, the cost of service to get them the water is no different than a Valdese taxpayer who lives on the other side, on the north side of Laurel. But to that point, it does bring into question, you know, the equity, if you will. And so I think the thing you got to keep mind on is there are requirements on what the utility fund can do, you know. So you got to be careful with the idea of utility fund supporting general fund endeavors. That's a situation that the city of Newton has gotten itself in a bit of a pickle with in recent years. There were a lot of details in how the decisions were made, but ultimately the utility fund was doing utility work and then kind of on the side fixing streets and fixing sidewalks that wasn't really part of it, and somehow it got picked up in an audit.
This council has no
Right.
interest in doing that. And we know our sensitivity is to the people we hear from who say, hey, my utility fees go up every year, and we never even, there's not much discussion about that. They just sneak up on us. Plus, people pay it monthly, so they don't realize they're getting slammed over $800 a year for utility fees.
Sure. And I think to that point too, again, as I said earlier, I want to be sensitive to ratepayer fees. I'm paying them myself. The idea, though, that we'll talk a little bit more about here in a moment is, I think the expectation that utility bills would remain flat is largely flawed for anybody, and I don't enjoy that statement. I don't enjoy that position, but it's just a matter of looking at what's happening in the rest of the world and the fact that the town's expenses to operate the system continue to increase. So absent of a significant industrial user coming to town or something major like that just totally changes the landscape, folks ought to be expecting to keep up with inflation, at least, inside, outside. And so everything that we're doing with this plan tries to accomplish that goal, and it's also trying to accomplish that true up. And so the other true up that we would recommend to the town, and this was not based on council action, but just our examination of the fees, is in that sewer rate that we talked about earlier in the presentation. Currently, the town's sewer system accounts for something like 60-some% of the expenses, but only generates something like 30-some% of the revenue. And that's based on the fact that the sewer charge is so insignificant or so small in this case. So in addition...
RJ, if I can interrupt, is that sewer charge so low that it prevents us from getting some grants?
It is. That's the short answer. The longer answer is the state now not only looks at water rates and sewer rates independent to award grant money based on unit cost, they combine the two. And so just as a data point for the town, we're not recommending you go there. I want you to hear me say that first. But to get to that point to where you would have advantage over other utilities in competing for grant funds in North Carolina funding programs, your combined water and sewer rate for an inside 3,000 gallon a month user would have to be north of $79. So, even in the 10-year window that we look at, that Dale covered, in that chart with where rates would be 10 years from now, we wouldn't be at that number. And that would be assuming that everybody else in the state stays stagnant.
But there may be another grant opportunity. I think I read recently that Granite Falls got $5 million state grant to redo all their sewer lines. That may be, I may have that off a little bit, but it was a big number, and it was to redo a lot of sewer lines. But they went to the state and got that grant. If we had taken that kind of initiative, if we'd gone to the state and got, I forget what the initials are, they're all, capital improvement, some kind of funding from the state. If we had done that, that would have offset a big chunk of some of these sewer expenses that we're looking at now and on down the road.
That is a potential, yes. And so to Valde's point, the idea was surfaced that the city of Lenoir was looking for a partner to buy water from. And so in that case, the lobby, if you will, was made towards the elected representatives for that project as opposed to a sewer project. And I think The SCIF fund is probably the acronyms you were referring to. The state budget has been running in a surplus for many years now, to the tune of there are going to be billions of dollars available for all kinds of infrastructure projects in North Carolina in the next few years, if the state legislature maintains the current plan. I'd say that pretty cautionary, because it's always subject to change. And I think the other point of that too is a year or so ago, Dale and I provided a graph to the town. The DEQ, who hands out a lot of the awarded grant funds, competitive grant funds that is, had an analysis prepared, and it's 92 to 93% of all water and sewer projects are funded some way or another by rates and ratepayers. So the point in that is to say, whether it's debt service, whether it's just straight off of rates, or whether it's a combination of things, 92, 93% is still coming out of local rates some way or another. There's really only about 7% to be expected that is in true grant monies. Now, that number may change if the state continues, but I just kind of want to put that data point out there, in that I think the town does a pretty strong job at presenting itself as best it can for those grant opportunities, but they are very competitive. And for the foreseeable future, I think they're probably going to be about as effective going to your state legislators as it is going through some of these competitive programs. Not to say that we won't continue to try those things, but just looking at the lay of the landscape and where we expect the funds to come from. So looking again back at the true-ups, we would, in all of the analysis we provided, suggest to the town a sewer rate true-up. We're not going to reach a point where the sewer fully supports itself. Don't have to, don't need to. But we do look at that and would like to develop better equity or better alignment of the revenue and expenses in the sewer side. And we're again suggesting a 2-year true-up or transition period for those rate adjustments. And then that way you get the sewer expenses to where they are more self-sustaining. And then in the back part of the plan, after those first couple of years, sewer increases would align with everything else to just follow that typical increase for inflation. And so then, speaking of inflation, and my comment a little bit ago, we would look at all water customers receiving that 4% increase for inflationary purposes. So more or less everybody expects to pay 4% in this plan, and then those who are outside and those who are triple customers pay more than the 4% to get themselves to that true-up point of 1.5, or if we were to target 2.0 to get to that desired multiplier in the 2-year step.
That would take a council resolution to change the outside rate to a factor of 2.
Good point. This whole presentation, as I said, is about a plan, right? Council will have the opportunity to simmer on all of this, sleep on it, debate it, and then at the point of adopting rates and fees with the budget, that's why all of this is incorporated into the budget. At that point in time, when the council moves on the budget, that would be the appropriate time to set new rates for next year. And so we would provide staff and council those values more or less to plug into the is it an actual resolution? I'm not sure, but it would just be plugged into the new rate fees.
Once we adopt the budget, they would be adopted also, or established.
Yep. So I'm gonna let Dale speak again about, this is some data looking at those 2-year true-ups, but let him cover some of those points.
Dale, would you mind a 5-minute break?
Well, I wouldn't mind at all.
Thank you.
Rates would look like for the
Make it
various
bigger.
customers.
Okay.
So, again, inside customer rates for water That's your 4% inflation adder going across. Okay, for the next 2 years. You see the triple district, see that's a little different. You're gonna go from 3850 rather than to 4005 to 5005. Okay, that's roughly 25% increase. That's gonna generate in the neighborhood of about $400,000 in revenue. And again, that's half the true up, so it goes up another $12 in the next fiscal year. That's about another 22%, something along those lines. It's about 25 and 20 for the true up for the triple customers. And again, outside is your other point of comparison that gets you from current FY '24 to '25 through '26, which is the 4%. Actually, it's the 4% plus that true up to 1.5. So I think that's around 7% per year for the 2 years, if memory serves. So that's about what's happening on the water side of the equation. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I guess what we'd like to see is what those numbers would look like if we used the factor of 2.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. That's an easy
I think
adjustment
that
to make.
council needs to review that.
Can we have a copy of this too? Can that be emailed to us? Okay, thank you.
Do you look over the 2 year span, is that what we're looking at still?
Yeah.
Or do you wanna do a 3 year?
Yeah, I'd like to see this and the two, both.
Yeah, the 2.0 multiplier. So you need this table and
Yes,
the
and
2.0 true up.
Absolutely.
Okay, absolutely.
That'd be nice, thank you.
Okay, then on the sewer side of the equation, just in rough numbers right now, your revenue generates about $1 million less than it should for the expenses to run the sewer system. Okay, so the true up on that's about 30% a year over a 2 year period. Okay, so looking at those various customer classes on a 3,000 gallon sewer bill, these would be the increases that you would see over that 2 year true up period. Okay.
And there probably is a little different argument for raising sewer rates than raising water rates. First of all, is it's not, the sewer rates are not covering a very large portion of the total cost.
Right.
But the other thing is, with water, most people don't have a choice. They have, and if they have Valdese water, they have to use it. With sewer, a lot of people have a choice. They can put in a septic tank for $5,000 to $7,000, or they can hook up to the town sewer system in some places.
Yeah, I don't,
so they've got an economic choice that they can make, and in the long run, a sewer system is a whole lot better than having a septic system, unless the town's going to pump it out for you every year or so. But so I think there's probably a rationale for raising sewer rates.
correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, in city limits, you have to use the sewer, you can't have a septic
That's what I
tank.
thought.
If it's available, you are required by general statute.
Okay.
Required.
Thank you.
That may be true, but how many people in city limits who do have septic tanks?
I don't know the exact number, sir, I apologize. I know the Holly Hills subdivision does not, but other than that, maybe a handful.
There's not a whole lot, but we do find some from time to time that is not connected to sewer, but everyone still pays the sewer bill in order to be pumped. So with the sewer rates and everything, it affects the water and the sewer for all of
Okay.
us. So they have, and in some points where we find septic tanks, back in the day, sewer may not have been available. And when we do find those, most of the time it's within the real older homes that's in town that has septic systems. But once if they're on the sewer plant, then it's pumped, every 12 months or as needed basis per the septic tank company that does that for us. They do an inspection of them once we find those, and they let the homeowner know, hey, this is that. If there's sewer lines available, if it's not gravity fed, then they have the option to put a pump in to change change out from the sewer tanks. But lots of them are still good, so they option to pay the sewer bill to be able to have a total.
And the sewer,
That we offer.
and the sewer rates are tied into water usage, aren't they? If your
Yes.
water usage goes up, your sewer rate goes up.
Yes, I forget exactly how it's calculated, but it is based on the 3,000 gallon.
All right. Yeah, but the people who have septic tanks,
Same
They-
way.
same formula?
It's the
Okay.
same formula,
All right.
no different.
Okay, then, next slide just switches over to the combined bill, the combined water sewer bill, FY '24 current on those various customer classes, then through 25, so then you can see the dollar change. Remember in the model output, we just had the one residential inside customer as kind of our benchmark, and that was the 405. You'll see that back on the table on that output with the model. But then looking at outside residential, what would be the dollar amount change going from fiscal year '24 to '25 for those other customer classes, outside residential, inside commercial, outside commercial. Okay. Now I think I've got one more slide maybe. Yeah, that's it. I'll let.
You got one more?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so any other questions on what those numbers look like? We'll get you those tables, so you have them in front of you. We'll include that 2.0 multiplier. That's kind of an accepted industry standard kind of a point. You get above 2.0, you're gonna probably have some problems. We'll certainly qualify any other types of information that we would provide in that sort of comparison as we go along, so.
Thank you, Dale. RJ?
Okay.
Good plan.
Questions, council?
And I'll say, not limited to those questions right now. If there's something that hits you, you wake up in a cold sweat tomorrow morning, feel free to jot it down and shoot it our way. We're happy to answer any questions that council may have. But again, I appreciate the opportunity to provide the info. I know it's not always a popular discussion, but certainly one that's worthwhile. And so we appreciate the chance to be part of it.
Thank you for your presentation. Very well
Thank you all.
done. Mr. Weichel, sir.
So, going back to our exhibit list, everything that Miguel just presented with the rate structures, those tables, based on the 1.5 multiplier that they're going to work towards in 2 years, that's captured in Exhibit C on your revenue sheets, just so you know. So those additional revenues are captured based on those numbers now. So if anything changes, say we go to 2.0 multiplier or something, that will adjust those numbers. And then just keep in mind the capital item requests, those are just suggested requests. I know the Vector truck has been a hot topic. Again, that's something that we can certainly keep contracting out and keep doing the minimum, but if council wants to do more than the minimum, then we can get our own equipment and do it and do 10 times that. So just food for thought there. So we're certainly happy to just keep contracting it out if council doesn't want to go forward with that purchase. Go
I
ahead.
have one little question and a couple big questions. A little question, I raised it yesterday and I forgot to raise it earlier today, but in our expenses on our water plant and our wastewater plant, there's a line item on each one. It's line item 30-8100-930, VEDEC, for $12,500. VEDEC is a lending organization that was founded here in Valdese many years ago. It's a wonderful organization. It lends money to new business startups all over the state. Once in a while, somebody in Valdese, a Valdese businessman takes advantage of it, but I haven't heard
of it creating any new jobs or new sewer customers or water customers for Valdese recently. Why are we paying Valdese $25,000 a year?
That is a long-standing relationship that was created before I was here, and that was the council's priority to continue that through the budget process. So that's why we have it back in there.
What
Certainly,
council decided that?
well, each year that it's adopted with the budget. So,
It slips through like it would have done this year if we hadn't raised a question about it.
well, yeah, it's on there for council to see. So, certainly.
Is there any justification for it?
I think when they were starting up, there was, but perhaps.
When was that?
When was it? Oh, I don't know. I don't know when they started.
Many years ago,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
That's
I don't have any answers about them in particular, but
That's the little question, all right.
yeah.
The big questions are, so what's, we're in a budgeting process, and it goes from now through, sometime in June when the council's gonna adopt the fiscal 24-25 budget. But next Monday, we're gonna have a public meeting. Now, we're gonna present to the public a draft budget. I want to understand what that process is. So what's gonna happen at this public meeting next Monday?
So at the
This coming Monday, I mean.
Yeah, this coming Monday. So we've presented the proposed budget as it is right now. What we're looking for at the Monday meeting is for council to give the manager and staff direction on the items that we've laid out. So utility fund, for example, do we keep the Vector truck in there? Do we remove it? Do we keep it in there? Do we pay fund balance? Things like that we talked about. Water and sewer rates, what direction we want to go there. And then general fund side, we got that deficit. Do we want to cover it with fund balance? Do we want to try to increase some revenues, make a few amenity cuts? They're not services. We tried to stay away from cutting services, just amenities are on that list. Do we want to do a combination of things? So those are the things that we need to talk about at next Monday's meeting.
So next Monday, you're gonna be presenting this information rolled up as a budget?
Well, we haven't gotten to the budget document yet, so these are pieces of it that it's a workshop, so we're working through the budget. We're not
Right.
presenting a,
But this coming Monday, what are we gonna be presenting there? Will it be a budget draft?
well, it would just be talking about the things we presented today. We wouldn't be presenting anything new.
It'll be,
Just
it'll
these
be-
numbers these numbers all over again?
It'll be
Well,
us making decisions on how we want to proceed. For example, the 2.0 water rates for outside customers, making those decisions.
Yeah.
And as far as like, do we want to leave this item in the budget and cut this one, or how we want to proceed?
Yeah, because we need to start drafting the final budget document in May so that the manager can do his budget message for the first meeting in June, because that's when that will be presented.
All right, so what the council has to do between now and Monday, what we council members need to do is review all this stuff we've done the last 2 days, come up with our list of things. I can see this coming Monday's meeting lasting 2 or 3 hours maybe, because it's gonna take resolutions, we're gonna be voting on, let's take this out, let's cut this back from here to here. Is that what we're gonna do?
It won't require resolutions, no. This will be just a working session for us to give the manager and the finance director and the department heads direction on how to proceed to prevent that, to prepare the final budget. For example, like we want to include the higher water rates. That will give them direction to proceed to prepare the documents needed for that. And it won't require resolutions. Once everything is in place as council wants, those will be adopted when we adopt the final budget. So it's actually just one vote when we approve the budget.
I understand that. I'm trying to figure out how next Monday's meeting is gonna go. So we come in, each of us have a list of 20, 30, 40 items, suggestions for the staff. So I'll make my suggestion. Are we gonna vote on it,
or how do we get it from my list into the staff budget draft? Won't we have to agree on it in some way? I'm just trying to envision how this is gonna go.
This is kind of a new step for us. As far as I know, we've never had this meeting that you're talking about, so it's new territory.
Yeah, we've presented all the data to this point, so now we just need council's direction to say, do this, do that. This is, you know, and obviously we're open to answering more questions that you have, but we're getting to the point in the year where we need to start getting some specific direction on what we need to do.
And if it takes, we'll have to vote on the water rates. If 4 of us want to go up on water rates and 1 of us don't, then we'll, just like always, majority rules. So it'll be up to the whole council to decide how and what's going to go in that budget. And it may require council votes.
We could
Mr.
do the
Steen?
capital sort of, you know, on its own. Which capital issues do we have problems with? And we could talk, you know, which ones you may be concerned about, and then we could do a vote.
Yeah.
And then we could go on to any other capital issues we have problems with. And, you know, I think that way we can certainly look at the capital that way.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Brian?
Yeah, and I was just wondering if y'all can do this by consensus. I don't know about formal voting, motions and all that, but by consensus, if that, you can do that, because
I
there's
would
gotta be
think
some
so.
way.
Yeah, I would think consensus would be work just fine.
Yeah, 'cause
Okay,
yeah, it'll be worth working together, trying
Yeah.
to come through it, so.
but we need to do our homework, right? We need to get our lists ready. We need to
Yeah.
go back through all these numbers.
Is that, council, I'll ask you, is this enough time between now and Monday for you folks to do this?
It has to be. When we've had, well,
So the next Monday's meeting was scheduled before this budget retreat was
Yes,
scheduled,
it
so
was.
we kind of got back in a corner on this one. Usually the budget retreats happens a little bit earlier in the year, is why and then the workshop happens a couple weeks later. But,
yeah.
so we're kind of backed in the corner because we got May coming upon us.
Last April 18th, when I sat in the budget workshop, even though we heard it said many times from the citizens there, I was there, and the News Herald reporter was there. I saw, it looked to me like the council members, Councilwoman Loman could maybe confirm this, had a budget draft in their hands, I think.
Well, it was all
It
this
was like
stuff. I
this,
kind of
yeah.
split it up this year, all the exhibits. So that's what they had last year was a version of this, but I've tried to keep it separate because we are doing this in like a more of an official meeting. So I wanted the exhibits separately so we can refer to them as we go. But that's basically what they had was everything you have here. So,
Okay.
yeah.
It's been interesting, and it's new, and it's new territory, that's wonderful.
Yep.
Change is good.
Anybody have anything else? Motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second, please. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Thank you, council, I appreciate it. And thanks to our staff and department heads and our citizens for being here and the news media.